Sorry, yeah, like that's.
No, I don't have one.
It's tiring for a while.
Hey, it's 9 o'clock. We are going to start the meeting. Thank you so much for everybody being here. Joel just, Chairman Wright just called in. Chairman? Finance Chair?
Yeah.
Chair,
Chair Wright? Chair, I have 2 chairs. Called in, he said he's a little bit behind, so we're going to start without him. And the first order of business is, yes, sir?
Yeah, before we start the agenda items, can I make some administrative requests of the chair and the chair? 1.1 is recognition of private achievement. So we'd like to make that as part of 1.2 because with the Utah School Information Management System. Also, because of the focus, and this is typical of the Finance Committee this time of year in October, we need to spend some quality time, so to speak, on 1.3, which is the spend plans for your carryover funds. It's quite a lot. It's quite in depth. So what we're asking is that we forgo the section review so that we can allot sufficient time between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. to cover everything else, the RDA included. And it's probably more conducive if we move the spend plans past the RDA process development discussion 1.4 and 1.5. So I know I'm asking for a lot. So basically, to summarize, for an administrative request of the staff is to combine 1.1 and 1.2 so we can recognize progress in the sense of the IT plan, to move 1.3 to past 1.4 and 1.5, and forgo the section review agenda item. It was scheduled to be the MSP section, but because of the focus on the carry forward and all that too, in that piece of it, we just don't think there's going to be enough time, and we want the Finance Committee to have the opportunity to focus, in the 3 hours on everything matters, but these are hot topics, so to speak. So that's okay with the chair and the Finance Committee members.
I'm okay with that. Can you summarize it again so I can write it down for Joel?
So combine 1.1 and 1.2, or not necessarily combine them, but the recognition of progress will take place as part of 1.2. We respectfully request, because we will have guests with the RDA process and the taxing entity committee, the South Jordan City, that we move 1.3 past 1.4 and 1.5. Does that make sense?
So you're moving 1.3 to
1.5 to the top.
past 1.5.
Yeah, so move, yes, so after we do the Utah Schools Information Management Systems, do 1.4 and then 1.5. Also too, 1.4 is actually very specific to Chair Wright. So if he's not here, he's an integral part of that RDA process development discussion that was brought to him, so maybe we need to just kick that to a time when, I'm not sure how far out it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, so we'll start at 1.1 and 2, those go together, then we'll go to 1.5,
5. Right.
and then maybe 1.4, and then 1.3. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay. So with that, if we can go ahead and start with 1.1, recognition of progress. Chair, will you allow Director Feld from IT to come forward, because we're going to talk about the Utah Schools Information Management System.
Yes, please.
So on the screens, I'll pull 1.2 up. In your backups, committee members, there's the plan for that. So Shima, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here too. So glad you're here. We've come up with a USIMS project strategy that I'll ask Jared and Chuma to present to you. This has been a production over time. It relates also to the audit that we received, where, by way of an executive session, we briefed all board members on the vulnerabilities of our systems. We've had several conversations regarding the need. We've come to a point within the office here where it's just simply a matter of the fact that our systems are either too old, the programming language is there. We've been, using baling wire. We use the symbolic term of a Jenga tower type analogy to this. And so by way of this plan, This is how we feel the direction, we set the right direction to get to what right looks like as far as integrated systems go at our level. So with that, Chair, we can turn it over to Director Felt and Director Chuma for further elaboration on this plan.
Thank you. Jared Felt, IT Director, USBE. So as Scott said, this is the result, this document and the strategy and plan is a result of us working with our team internally, our experience, and then our DTS consultant. And then also evaluating other states to see what's working, what's not working. And the result of that is this high-level document that we've provided you. As Scott mentioned, in April, I came to this committee and I talked about our current state of affairs, where we have 28 different systems, and we compared it to a Jenga tower, where there's no planned architecture. We have ad hoc IT acquisitions that we just add to our existing systems. We have data integrity issues. We have manual scrubbing of data, cleansing that our data and statistics teams have to do, as well as our teams, before we submit those reports to the federal government, the state government, and the board. So this strategy encompasses, it will be designed around a singular architecture. So we're taking those 28 different systems and we're making it into two primary, I don't know what you'd call it, front end and a back end. So you've got your front end portal where, and it's all role based. So LEAs, internal staff can access a web portal and pull and create reports as needed. The back end is designed around our data collection and reporting capabilities. So we have student data, teacher educator data, and financial data. I'm gonna let Chuma add to that, and then we'll take any questions that you'd have.
Yeah, so as Mr. Feld said, we're seeking to re-envision how we do data collections around here. This seeks to simplify data collections and data retrieval. So as he stated earlier, we talk about the collection of student data, teacher data, the financial data, which consists of the LEAs in schools, and then we have that data going into a data warehousing component. Then in addition to that, we have a business intelligence layer, which allows the teams here at USBE to do data analysis instead of data cleansing and scrubbing today. That's what most of the time's done. It's a lot of data cleaning work instead of data analysis work to help the LEAs. So this will provide a true web-based front end for the LEAs, for internal users, to access clean data sets. As Jared said earlier, what we have is we have amalgamated data sets, and so what ends up happening every year during what we like to call Apollo 13 moments, like October 1, July 1, and our December 1 timeframe, is our teams have to get together. Not just our teams, data and statistics, other teams in the building have to get together, and they have to take data from here, take data from there, and then they have to cut and paste it, try to make it look right. And most of the time, when you guys probably ask for data, you're like, "Hey, can you show me this data again?" And they're like, "Well, it's gonna be an effort to get that back. It's gonna be like getting a ship back from the moon at that point in time." So that's where we're at.
So the course of action that we've evaluated several, and the course of action we determined would be the best would be to supplement our internal organic team with contractors to get this accomplished. And so, and the timeline you can see it would take about 3.5 years, and it's spread over with 13 activities, all the way from defining requirements down to the training of the internal staff and LEAs. The cost to do that would be $17.2 million, with an estimate of $3 to $5 million for hardware and software.
Chair, if I may interject at this point, so yesterday during the board meeting, the $17.2 million was put on the package proposal as one-time funding, subject of course to revenue and all the process that we're taking. We'll do a business case for the 17.2 and submit that to the governor's office to meet the letter of the law, the Budgetary Procedures Act, since the board approved that to be an integral part or piece of your package, of your budget proposal package. What we would need to do though is make sure that that 17.2 is non-lapsing, because, you know, it's not, we wouldn't be able to achieve the objectives that we're outlining for you here in this plan in a 1-year time period. So the 17.2 is basically to be spread out over a 3.5-year period, roughly. In addition to the 5 million that was allotted to us or appropriated to us last year, overall fix to Cactus, all of the integration and great things we need to do to get our systems into the 21st century. So, sorry, Jared, I just want to make sure that we pointed that out, that was an action that was taken by the full board yesterday related to the 17.2 million request that we analyzed and calculated.
Can I ask you a question also? So when we moved from 2 Utrex and everybody had to start using HTML products, and that was a number of years ago, there was some growing pains within our districts. With this 3-year timeline, was this going to be enough time for our districts to not have to panic, or will they be able to, because our information systems, we've talked about in the past, have a bridge. And so is this going to provide a good enough bridge for them? Is this going to provide enough timeline for them to accommodate their products so that they can talk to our product better? Do you feel this is a sufficient time? And we're giving our districts enough support for them to do this with not too much anxiety?
Good question. So we've figured into the plan a transition plan for the LEA. So what we will do is sustain what we currently have, so districts can continue to submit data. Once we get this new acquisition into place, we will take a small set of LEAs and roll them over and work with them to test and get them up to speed. So, we will ask for volunteers, we will work with their staff to get this done. And then once we are confident in how it's gonna work and have no bugs, we'll roll that out, so.
And if I may, we will stay inclusive of the LEAs throughout this process. This plan doesn't necessarily have to be the final plan. We feel it's pretty, fidelity and the integrity of the plan is good. We will want some feedback on the plan, not especially from you all, from all the board members, but also from the LEAs itself, so that they feel the same way that we presented here, that it's the least obtrusive thing that we can do to sustain and keep the systems going while we through this process, but then always inclusive of them and their input on, maybe if we move this a little bit, or, so what my point is that 3.5 years could change a little bit. I don't think it'd be like, an additional 4 years, 5 years, or anything like that. But we really are going to be conscientious of just how much, again, go to Chuma's point about, the heavy lift points in the year, October, December, July. We're going to try to remain conscientious about that and not make it so that they have to abandon their systems or do all that too. Concept going.
Right.
Chair Huntsman?
Just a quick comment, maybe a request on this. I like this a lot, but one thing that would be, I think, handy for me and maybe this committee and the board would be if you had a spend plan that kind of mirrors these activities. Now, of course, there's evolution and you run into roadblocks and snags and challenges, but it would help us moving forward to see the big picture.
So we do have a spreadsheet that shows the burn down rate of this and when staff, contractors come on board and then ramp down. So we can provide that.
But I think this has got, Chair,
Go ahead.
I think it's really good detail, but if we had the dollars attached to it, and then if you need additional or something comes under, but it's just, you're managing, you've got your activities, you have your timelines, and if we just had that.
I'd just like to add to what Scott was saying. So this defined requirements and system architecture will be heavily involved with the LEAs to, provide feedback, and we'll work with them to make sure that they are all on board with where we're trying to go.
Great.
don't know who's in charge now. Are you still in charge?
She still is.
So 3 years down the road, or 3.5, or however long it takes, what will the public see that's an advantage? Because when I talk to people, they're very concerned that we're spending money on these kinds of things instead of salaries. So what can we tell them that will help them understand why we need this?
Well, I think ease of access, so student backpack, one point of entry for not just the public, but the LEAs, better data, quicker access to data. Right now, we spend about $10 million, $11 million a year to maintain these 28 different systems. So when you look at it, we're hoping that, that number will be consolidated as well. We don't know yet, but so we will, in the long run, hopefully be saving money with staff resources and things like that.
And I would imagine if it doesn't take as much staff time, right, will you need as much staff? Do we know? Or will they just have time to work on other things?
Chair, I'd like to address that question. So Jared hit on this point. By way of this process over the time period, and for lack of a better term, we'll surge staff with additional resources and contracting, and then we'll fall back to what level we're at now, which is significantly less staff than what we had 3 years ago. The idea is that by augmenting the current staff over the 3-year period, we get to what right looks like, but then we fall back to, and by fall back I don't mean that as a negative term, but we come back to the level that we're at right now. And by way of this process, our staff learn, develop, so that they're the subject matter experts, and we look at that as a retainment possibility or a way to retain the quality staff that we have existing right now. We've got some great players on the IT team and the data and statistics team. So I don't see it reducing the amount, but there will be a slight increase in the amount of personnel that we need to do this. I'll fall back to that too, and I feel comfortable that once we get to what right looks like, we can sustain it with the personnel footprint that we have in IT and data and statistics. Chair, if they too. I know I'm supposed to go through you.
Thank you.
I think there will be efficiencies gained. So as you said, staff will be able to focus on other things as well. Security on the IT side, making sure. Right now we're very reactive to data needs, and so we can be proactive in this situation.
It does sound like there'll be a decrease in audits because we'll have more fluidity in our data. And then also scrubbing doesn't seem to be as efficient or as accurate as maybe just the data. So these efficiencies will bring some other benefits.
I would like to add also, there'll also be other efficiencies gained around the building because IT is just one component of the data analysis piece.
Yeah.
So other people around the building will have time to do actual work with respect to with respect to the data.
Excellent. Questions for us?
No, not this meeting. So the next step for your staff is to get with the LEAs. So I had met with a couple of the BAs, Davis and, oh my gosh, I can't remember. Anyway, I met with them. So we're going to start to share this with them. We wanted you to see it first. Now we get the LEAs back into it to go for that inclusiveness, get their input to the plan. I guess what I'm requesting is that we make this a perpetual agenda item, Finance Committee, because of what the Chair Huntsman pointed out, to bring back those levels of details and give us a chance to consult with the LEAs. Well, and obviously we wouldn't be able to go out to the 41 districts and the 100 and so charter schools, so it'll be represented. We don't necessarily need an action now because yesterday the full board supported it, making it part of your budget proposal funding. Based on what we get back from the LEAs and in this process of our inclusiveness of them, there may be some actions that we need. So I'm just asking for permission to keep this as a perpetual item.
Any other questions? Okay.
like.
Oh, sorry. Scott?
Scott, is it
Well,
for-
should we advise him of the administrative changes that,
Yes, I have it written
okay,
down.
so.
So we're gonna go to
we
one,
Shuffled the agenda a bit, sir.
1.3 to here,
Yeah.
so the next item is 1.4.
or 1.5, because we have some people here, but we wanted you to, 1.4.
Actually, it can be 1.4 because he's here now.
I have,
Thank you so much for your time.
And for the hour recorded yesterday.
I have a conflict on 1.4 and sometimes leave the room and give it to board member Reevy, and I'll come back after 1.4.
We'll be sure to find you this time when we're done.
Just don't hide.
Don't go far now.
Stay in
Fun to
gender
hang
neutral.
out over there in Honda, and places to hang out down here.
I'm glad you said that, because I couldn't figure out.
So we're moving on to 1.4, Tax Entity Committee, South Jordan City.
Okay, if we, well, I think he wants to leave for 1 point. So he is leaving for 1.5 or?
The
is he-
tax entity,
1.4, no, I very much want to be here for 1.5.
Right, so we are gonna do the RDA process development?
The taxing entity committee.
Well, we wanted to do 1.4.
1.4, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm.
1.4 is.
Just tell us which one you want to do
yeah,
next.
they're
Oh,
yeah,
they're
that's-
switched on the
let's
opposite, because this
Okay.
shows taxing entity is 1.4, and
Yeah,
that one
conflict.
shows RDA.
On the South
So you
Jordan
don't
City.
have a conflict with 1.4, right, sir?
No.
Okay, so if you could stay for 1.4, because this was a lot of your direction.
These are just.
So, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
One second. This is incorrect.
Well, or this is, maybe electronically, your deputy superintendent of operations flipped those things, all counseling. Yeah, I see, okay. So I apologize, let me, here, what's this? Okay.
Yeah, it's flipped online.
It doesn't really matter.
Just
He
use
has
the
a
word Scott.
conflict
We'll
with the
follow
South
along.
Jordan City.
Okay, so now we're going to 1.5 on the board list, okay. Sorry about that, I think maybe the electronics messed you up.
But don't we want to deal with the people that are here on 1.4?
Well, so we can, is Merit Medical here? Yeah, okay, so they are here now, I wasn't sure if they would be here.
We're here, we're here.
So it's up to you, Chair. We can do 1.4 now, or we can do 1.5. It's up to you. Because Merit Medical is here now, and that they would be the ones that we would need to call up to speak to 1.4.
Make them wait.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah.
Okay, so then, yes, sir, if you
As much as I want to make Greg Freedy wait, let's not.
So Chair Reedy, in the absence of Chair Riding stepping out, will you please invite Merit Medical to the table to further develop 1.4? Taxing entity committee.
Merit Medical and South Jordan City, could you please come to the table and bring 2 extra chairs? Yes. Oh, you don't need to speak for the
Here's a chair.
I know. Okay. Thanks.
No.
Also, Chair, from the staff, Ron Morton, he's the board's designated tech representative. So he's gonna join the panel too, if that's okay.
Yes, before you speak, please state all of your names so that.
Ron Horton from the staff.
I'm Brian Priest with the Redevelopment Agency of South Jordan City.
I'm Brady with Merit Medical.
And I'm Rob Sand, Lewis Young Robertson, Birmingham. We're financial advisors for the city.
Thanks, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, we appreciate your time here. We have what to South Jordan City and to Merit Medical is a very important decision that needs to be made. It's an extension of the existing taxing, or the economic development area that's formed under a taxing entity committee, which not many of these are happening anymore. Mostly they're the interlocal agreements. But We are here in support of Merit Medical. Merit Medical is the largest employer in South Jordan City. They are a very, very good corporate partner with the city, with the school districts. They're right now in negotiations with the Jordan School District on internship programs. One of the things that's resulted from our discussions on this, and we're looking very forward to the expansion of Merit Medical and the jobs it will bring to our community and the things that they do for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Mr. Freedy talk about Merit Medical and the expansion, and then Mr. Sant knows the numbers very well, so we'll go ahead from that. And let me just add real quick, I'm sorry, that the existing EDA, we have benchmarks in there, and they have met those, basically shattered all of those based on jobs and numbers of square feet of building built and whatnot, and we will have similar types of things for them to achieve these goals. So, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Well, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I don't get to see Spencer all that much anymore since I don't spend a lot of time on the Hill, so it's always good. I didn't recognize you with your new facial hair, but there you go. So thank you. As many of you know, Merit Medical is a largest homegrown medical device company in the state of Utah. We began in 1987 by Fred Lampropoulos and have grown to over 2,000 employees here in Utah with revenues approaching $1 billion. We have a worldwide footprint with facilities around the world, manufacturing in 12 different facilities. From Ireland to Singapore to Australia to Mexico. And we produce single-use medical devices that are used primarily in radiology and cardiology. What we'd really like to do today is spend a little time talking about our vision for a future of Merit Medical and what that means potentially for the state of Utah. I won't spend a lot of time on the company. I'm sure many of you are familiar with who we are and what we do. And I'd like to focus, if we could, about what that vision is as we continue to build the business. As I mentioned, we have a worldwide footprint and have grown dramatically in the state of Utah. Since 1987, the company has never had a down year. Our revenues have grown every year since 1987. There are a few companies, I think, that could point to that kind of growth, and what that has allowed us to do is expand not only in facilities, which generate property taxes for many entities in the state, but more importantly in headcount. Our headcount has continued to grow here in Utah, and our overall compensation has continued to grow in Utah. Over that period of growth, we are now entering a period where we need some additional investment in infrastructure to sustain the business long term. I really look at this as a phase 4 investment as we continue to expand our product offering. We continue to invest heavily in research and development, and as we continue to make a number of key acquisitions to supplement our operations. As recently as Monday, Merit Medical announced its largest transaction in its history, in which we'll be acquiring a company in California that does women health care for over $200 million. It's a large transaction which will benefit the state of Utah directly for many years to come. If you look at our payroll has grown each year, and as well as our employment. What I'd like to do is focus perhaps on a couple key questions as we talk about economic development areas and RDAs. One of the key considerations is, would this development occur in Utah anyway? If we weren't given these incentives, would Merit invest in Utah anyway? And what are our options for investment? I'm sure many of you have talked to companies that talk about having other options for investment. And in reality, many don't, right? It's a game that many companies play, understanding the criteria that entities have when considering these kind of incentives. In Merit's case, we truly do have a lot of options. We have 2 facilities, for example, in Ireland. The Irish government has been very aggressive in economic development and attracting medical device companies. For example, they have offered to build a building on behalf of Merit Medical and allow us to use that building free of charge to increase our jobs in Ireland. It's a pretty attractive incentive, and it's not unusual for them to do that. We have a large presence in Ireland, and certainly that is an option that we have as we look forward. Merit has a new facility in Pearland, Texas, just south of Houston. It's a facility that has significant capacity and land behind the facility that would accommodate another facility. Again, an option for Merit to choose to invest. We also have a facility in Mexico, a newer facility that allows for us to have access to labor, which has been very instrumental in helping us grow our business. At the end of the day, guys, Utah's home. We grew up here in Utah. We live here in Utah. We call Utah home. We want the investment to occur here in Utah. The challenge is we're also publicly held, and as shareholders, they expect a reasonable return, and we have to be responsible in our approach as we make those investments. Just as you expect reasonable returns and as you manage your finances, Merit too has to have some reasonable return to ensure that we continue to grow and invest. Now, that being said, something important about Merit is we don't pay a dividend. Every dollar we make, we reinvest back in the business, and that business has grown dramatically as a result of that. So I guess the point is, as you look at the presentation, we clearly have a number of options. Again, we would prefer to be here. So what would a plan look like in Utah? We've tried to lay out what that would look like. I'm not going to go through each one of these projects. You can see what the building schedule is. You can see what the investment is. But the bottom line is it will require about a $500 million investment in new facilities and in new machinery and equipment. It's a lot of money to spend. It's a lot of money to come up with. It's a lot of additional tax base and jobs to benefit the state of Utah. Those facilities will also generate about 2,400 new jobs over the next 15 years. That more than doubles Merit's footprint here in the state of Utah. Those jobs traditionally are high-paying jobs. While there are production jobs related, Merit is the headquarters for our professional services provided to the company. Accounting, legal, research and development, which is very important. So as the overall business grows and expands, the services that are required to sustain that business grow and expand here in Utah as well. And those are the kind of jobs, I believe, as a state we want, and the kind of opportunities we want to provide our children coming out of school as an opportunity to stay here in the state of Utah. So I'll stop there and allow Rob maybe to talk a little bit about some of the financial aspects and come back and if there's any other questions.
And before Rob gets started, I just want to mention that we have met with the Jordan School District Finance Committee. They have some questions. We're working through those. We have met with the county's ad hoc committee, and they have some questions. Some are similar, some are not. As you see, we have the support of the Taxpayers Association, and which we think is a really big deal, because that's not easy to get with these types of projects.
Interestingly, I was all in favor of this until that came.
Well, turn that sheet over. But anyway, so we understand that this is a big ask, and extending a successful project area, we understand it's a big deal, and but as Greg pointed out, it's a big, there's some big but-fors there.
Before you go,
Yes,
so
you can jump right in.
this is just basically advising our how our person's going to vote on the committee.
Yes, and to his point about the Jordan Finance Committee, we consulted with the BA there, John Larson, and they want a little bit more time to look at this. It's potentially precedent setting. So what I would recommend is a staff member to this committee that you allow them to, because from my experience with the board, they typically want to know where the district stands before you direct the tech, your tech appointee to vote, right?
So, I want to just go through timing though.
Yes, sir.
You know, was not a big fan of the Facebook proposal because it didn't deliver high-paying jobs, quite frankly, for the amount of money that we were outlaid. This is like the polar opposite of what the Facebook situation is. This is a company that delivers high-paying jobs. It's homegrown. There's not a lot of cities that can say there's a world headquarters and truly be a world headquarters and not just they made it up because it's the only place they have, right? So in my mind, the timing of this is really important because we have our next meeting. This would go to our board meeting in November, right? And I don't want it to have to come back to here before it goes. I want it to be able to be placed on the November board meeting with some kind of recommendation from us. The full board won't meet on it until November, and I'm sure that the school district will have time between now and November to review that. But we could give a recommendation from here pending the full board's vote so that it doesn't slow anything down.
We do have a meeting on Friday,
I was gonna.
a week from today, on the 12th, with the finance committee, and then we'll be meeting with the full board.
And I do know it's precedent setting, but boy, I'd love to be able to set a precedent with this kind of presentation. It's interesting that our very next item that we're going to talk about is the RDA process. And fortunately, you didn't have to sit through that because it's going to talk a lot about workarounds, which is what happened with Facebook, which I think is, in my mind, criminal because it was turned down once in the appropriate process, and then they went and did these interlocal agreements and did this giant workaround, which is not really part of the process. So I know you want to make a presentation, but I would just like to say that you can, if it were me, I would save my presentation for the full board. I think I'm ready to make a motion to approve this, and you can come back to the full board and give a full-blown presentation in November. And we can continue to move, unless there's, I would move that we direct this to move to the full board and that our recommendation should be that our committee member vote in favor of this.
Councilman?
There's another part of this to save them from going to the full board, and that is the way this plan is proposed, just move it out of, it gets moved out of committee and they don't have to come back. If the details of this tweaks or changes because of Friday's meeting, we still move forward, but we pull it off the consent and say to the full board, these are the differences.
And I would, my
We
only,
still get to the same place.
right, but I mean, this is one of those things where I want to allow them to come in and cheerlead in front of the full board, because it is what we should be, flying the flag for. It's a huge opportunity. And maybe they don't want to come and make a presentation to the full board, but.
We haven't in the past, so this is like a poster child of a really sweet RDA or CDA.
Right.
And so you could grandstand it in front of the board, but we
Let's go
haven't
the
in the
easiest
past.
way.
I'm just saying, we could still invite them if we choose to, but
Okay.
could still move this forward, and with support, pending any changes that might happen between now and then.
So I'd add that to my motion. That's how
So, as your primary staff, and based on the experience we've had in, with the process, which is a good process, my understanding is board members do want to advise the tech vote along the lines of what the district says or supports. And it was articulated by both of us, and what I know from where we're at on, this date time group, that the committee for the school district working on consideration. So what I would just recommend is that as part of the motion, whether it's placed on the consent calendar, because what we can do is we can load the presentation into the consent calendar, we can do all of that. But you might want to make the caveat that it's conditional upon the finalization of the process that's undergoing with the school district.
But we haven't always, I mean, I love our local school districts. We didn't, for example, on the Facebook, the local school district came back in support of it. He opposed it. Remember? So, I mean, I do want to work harmoniously with the business administrators, but I don't want to just, if we're here, we're as a state school board in here, I mean, you know I don't want us to be here. I would assume eliminate state school board. But since we're here, maybe we ought to just take our role serious and not just say whatever, we're going to do whatever that district does.
It can still, we're looking at this, not conditional on them, and we can move it to the full board. If the local board is against it, then that information would be shared in our full board meeting and everything else, but we at least we can still move this forward, Scott. I don't believe we have to add that piece in, because it becomes relevant when it becomes the board's full.
Right. So just for clarity, great, I fully understand, sir. Would the expectation be, though, that, you know, a representative from the district would come speak to that or be available to speak to the point? Or that calendar, and what would be the expectation of the presentation? Would we load the presentation that you have here into the consent calendar as well? So all board.
At a minimum, I would say at a minimum,
Yes, go
at a
ahead.
minimum, yes. And then a lot of things can change between now and our board meeting. We just address those changes, but
And
the
the
way
main
this is
reason why-
packaged up,
The main reason why we're having all this dialogue, it just keeps Joel out of the room long.
So I'd like,
can you guys take a gavel?
I'd like to make a motion that we move this to the full board with the representatives from, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just confirming that.
Other than a second.
You're restating my
Already
motion.
starting.
We don't need a second.
Okay, and then I would like to make a comment that I think that the average salary of $55,000 compared to our average salary in Utah of 37 is amazing. I love that we have internships because that's a very STEM-oriented goal. I really appreciate all this information, so we don't need a second. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
But I would like a representative from Jordan School Board or a statement that says they support this.
We'll invite them.
Okay.
And I'd actually like to know who the man with the beard is. I mean, we need to know.
I'm Robert, and I don't really enjoy talking, so I appreciate all this.
Yeah.
Because he does, so
Good team.
all in favor?
Aye.
I just might, just to say thank you,
Yes.
and just let you know that we were knee-deep in the Facebook deal for a long time. We did not see that as a good deal, and we pulled out of our own volition and
We're
said,
still talking, Joel.
and so I just hope we appreciate a good deal, and this is a good deal, and that was not.
Yeah.
And we're supporting what you did.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
I
a
need a
lot.
tour of the Ireland facility.
Absolutely.
And the skiing isn't as good in Texas as it is here, so you don't really have any options.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Actually, sir, can you send me an electronic copy of this? please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's shocking that Howard Stevenson stepped up for his former employee, Greg Brady.
Is someone security?
You took it with you.
Your ring will work on it. Joel's gotta have joy.
How's yours?
Thank you. Item 1.4. Now move on to item 1.5, Deputy Jones.
So this is a follow-up to discussions that occurred previously in the committee meeting where staff provided a recommendation that either by way of, this is where we need your guidance, either by way of a policy change or a rule, which, you know, depending on how you want to approach this. You can go to 1.5 in the body of the agenda item. There we go. We're recommending, so if you go to the recommended action section, we're recommending that, that you as the Finance Committee give us direction on whether you want to create a policy or a rule. There's, to my understanding, there's really no rule right now established that really is detailed enough as far as what the RDA processes are, what the board's vision or direction is as far as the process goes. So what we crafted internally is this statement or recommendation that we say something along the lines of the Utah State Board of Education will direct their taxing entity committee representative vote only for a CAR proposal. And maybe we don't say only because there's other conditions that we recognize on that too, so we might change the wording in that. After CAR proposals have been vetted in 2 subsequent public board meetings. The first meeting shall be in a board standing committee, which you're seeing is occurring in this example with Jordan School District. They're, you know, it's in a standing committee meeting and they're developing that. The first hearing shall be in a board standing committee and the subsequent hearing in a full board meeting in a subsequent month. Because the staff's understanding of the dialogue that was occurring with among you was that we want to try to make sure that we're specific in fact that we want to allow sufficient time for the public, for board members, for all stakeholders, if you will, that are potentially affected by this process or an RDA, to have at least that time frame where they can, you know, fully engage or realize what's occurring in a sufficient time frame, like, you know, a month to 2 months.
Do we usually get that much notice?
So it's varied. I think, you know, there's been concerns that sometimes, you know, these types of RDAs or CRAs are made, and this is Scott, not speaking for Scott, but what has been input to us is that sometimes they're forced quickly, like on a 3-day time frame, and then others were like, well, you know, if I had known and had the opportunity to have done pretty much what happened here today, right, where, you know, it's publicly vetted and, you know, if the presentation is cut off or they don't completely go through the slides, at least there's another, you know, up to an amount of 30 days where the public could know that a meeting is taking place, i.e. the Jordan Standing Committee. You know, the gentleman said they're meeting next week and, you know, and the Jordan School District on that. So there has been some feedback that in some instances, the public has felt that, you know, CRA or RDA was forced on district or, you know, the community, if you will. So what we're trying to do is just trying to balance that by making this recommendation. And additionally, the Utah State Board of Education encourages all school districts to have, and maybe the wording isn't right there, have a clear practice or policies concerning the evaluation of and participation in tax increment financial projects within their boundaries by way of their own or same policy or rule. Right? So we create a rule that establishes the parameters, if you will, or the guardrails, or some of these terms we've been using on that. But that ultimately, though, you know, the board is not mandating that they do it. My understanding is most of the LEA's districts will or have policies in place. One was shared with me by the BA from Canyons, Mr. Wilcox, right? So we would want to see that, though, with all the other districts as well. And that's what we need from you today is, you know, from here, if you're appreciative of this, or you want to, you know, quote unquote, tweak it a little bit on the wording, or just allow us to pursue a specific rule along these lines, that's what we need your staff.
The way I see this evolution working and the way that's proposed here on this recommended action, it's doing a couple things, but it's not going to stop what's been happening in the past. What's being proposed here is just our one vote. How are we controlling our one vote? And is a problem bigger than that? So I think we can work this way if we choose to, but at the same time, if we're trying to bring this betterment to this whole process, then I think there's other people that have skin in the game. There's the legislature's one, as this is set up, but one of the bodies that probably promotes and supports the RDA, CDA, and this entity, I should say. It isn't the state's economic development group, but probably the most powerful player in trying to facilitate these things is EDC Utah. It might not hurt to bring EDC Utah in here because they aggressively promote the RDA and CDA, and they package a lot of these things and they rush a lot of things. In fact, on the Facebook, do you remember they were
What was a gun to our head?
And spearheading a lot of this. So we can move along, we can move forward on how we control our vote by rule, the one vote we have. But I would recommend that we bring like EDC Utah in here. Maybe early next month and have them talk about the RDA, CDA process and our concern, because we may choose, because of who we are, look at the legislative piece too to see if we can bring a betterment there or find a legislator to deal with it. But it's just bigger. We're just going to control our one vote process that we have here. That's what I'm throwing.
Board Member Stokes.
But let's be honest, we've only been able to cast one vote that's made a difference, and that's because Salt Lake County, who I think has 2 votes, they've set it up, I don't know if you can say on purpose, so that even if we vote no and the school district votes no, it's still not enough, right? It still passes. And for all the talk about, education and wanting to fund education, the process is set up for us to fail every time. And when we did step in and make a difference, they just created a new process. And I would have liked to have sued over that process, because it bypassed us and the school district down there. I mean, they can say, well, we entered into a local agreement. Well, we're one of the people on the committee, and we didn't enter into a interlocal agreement, right? It was just the school district. One more argument for there's really no need for us. But if they're going to say that we have a involvement in this, I think we should have stood up and said, hey, you haven't done an interlocal agreement with us, and we are going to sue over it because you're doing exactly the same thing as a EDA, CDA, RDA, whatever you want to call it today. Exactly the same thing, but you're leaving us out of the interlocal agreement process, and we have money involved in that as well. So, I mean, I think that discussion needs to be part of the discussion. I think future legislation should say you can't do economic giveaways through interlocal agreement if it's in an RDA or a CDA or an EDA. And I think we ought to go up and advocate that case. You don't just get to bypass us because we tell you no, and you come back and repackage it in a different way. That deal is a bad deal for the children of this state. And no matter how you slice it, whether you do it through interlocal agreements, it's still a bad deal. And I think, Chair Huntsman, your idea of bringing in EDC Utah is fantastic, because They're the ones that went and put the package together and figured out how to work around us. And so we're gonna have our energy, our water, for 5 people who go in and turn on lights and make sure that they hear a hum of the servers. The servers are humming, everything's okay. Those are not great jobs. So anyhow, I think in our discussion, that ought to be a part of it.
And I don't want to disagree with,
No one ever does, Chair Huntsman.
Yeah.
No one ever does.
with Board Member Stokes, but I don't know, because it didn't come before, I don't know if it was a good deal or a bad deal. That's my problem. And you're saying it's
Well,
bad, but I have no idea what the deal is, because we were bypassed.
Good deals usually happen in the daylight, right?
Well,
Bad deals usually happen through interlocal agreements. So it's probably even a worse deal than the one that was in the daylight.
But the fact that deal isn't here is what's got me concerned, and so.
Cockroaches don't like living in light.
And it doesn't take a board action. We can put it on our account, or on put our agenda together, we can make that invitation happen. But maybe I'll make a motion that we invite EDC Utah to come to us and discuss RDA, CDA, the discount process, and maybe, and then also include how the other deal was crafted.
But it's interesting that this deal didn't need to have EDC Utah come and do it, right? This deal didn't need a salesman. And I like that about it.
They could still be in the picture. I'm not saying they're the enemy.
Right, oh no.
Because I personally see a lot of good things go through that organization. But I think we can get to a better place and gain intelligence and maybe even get momentum on proving something with the legislature.
I think the process that Scott suggested is an absolute bare minimum of what we ought to do, because it's a better process.
I have a few thoughts. I really appreciate your comments. Myself and Spencer care a lot about this issue. Better or worse, maybe 3 months. But I'd like to get something done before then. I haven't heard a single candidate campaign or talk about this issue. This is actually the issue why I ran for state school board. State school board voted for the Alpine School District, Geneva Steel RDA, over and against the wishes of Alpine School District, making a $300 million RDA instead of a $150 RDA. And that staff member wasn't accountable. The state school board didn't even know. That was a $300 million decision. And that made me so mad, that's why I ran. And I've never shied away from that. And that's, we've come a long way from that, and I'm very proud of that. I think there's 3 things here. I think we ought to ask Deputy Jones to further develop our own internal policy. No matter what we say, I love when we talk about screen time. I've heard a lot lately. You can tell your kids whatever you want, but unless you model that behavior, it's utterly worthless and pointless. And that's a really rude statement that's completely true. So I think we need to say, we're not going to vote for these things. First off, we're not going to vote, over a school district. The school district doesn't want it. We're for sure not going to impose it. And second, we want some best practices, meaning there's 30 days notice, or roughly that, so that, because what happened at Alpine School District with Facebook is they said that you have 3 days to decide. And none of those school board members were elected to evaluate Facebook data centers. And so they didn't get a chance to hear from their public. And that's why I almost feel like they didn't want them to hear from their public. So let's try and model that internally, saying that's what we're going to do. And maybe the second thing is we encourage school districts also to adopt policies, hopefully similar to ours. So, it's like, the decision when you're a 16-year-old whether you drink alcohol or not should have been made long before you're offered the first drink. And that's the same thing, I think, with these RDAs. The school districts need to decide, here's our policy, thank you very much, please follow it. Because then you get, Governor Herbert, Mitt Romney, CEO of Facebook, calling, some poor little school board member and saying, if you don't pass this in 3 days, the world's gonna end. You'll never have any jobs in your city and it'll be your fault. And so they encourage school districts to pass policies that at least say, hey, we need public input on these. Bring your deal, we have to talk about it for 30 days, and then we'll do it. And I don't think either of those things, involve our friends at EDC Utah or should harm anything. And then I would love to bring in EDC Utah and talk to them about this, because I agree that there are lots of people at the table, but here's what really alarms me is that it's built on the backs of education. These things, 60 to 70% of the funding comes from education. So there are lots of parties, but they're funded by education. And I talked to Rob Smith, the business manager at Alpine School District this morning, and he said, Joel, here's the best solution. Just say, state, cities, counties, mosquito districts, you can all do whatever you want, but school districts can't be involved in these at all. Boom, end of story. And then if the state of Utah wants to use its tax resources or ability or even grants to get all these companies, they can do it. That's just fine. But education funding is left intact because Alpine School District is the largest school district in the state of Utah, most sophisticated, and he says, we don't have the ability no one runs for Alpine School Board to figure out these things, and we don't have the capability to figure out whether they make sense. And it doesn't make sense for us to develop that capability to figure out if they make sense, despite the fact that Alpine School District's giving well over $50 million a year in these tax breaks. So maybe they should hire Lewis Young or someone else full-time to help them evaluate those, but they're conflicted and on the other side of everything. So it's just flat out hard. Spencer.
That's a piece of legislation though, right?
Yeah.
So, and you hear my arguments on setting legislative priorities. This is one that if we want to set it, we ought to set this legislative priority. We ought to endorse that concept, and we ought to put it on our list of that's something actually meaningful.
Yeah.
And you'd probably have to say, from here on out, have to find a legislator that was willing to carry that. But I make the argument that I think you've heard me talk about a company located in Ogden, Utah. I won't name the company. The CEO lived in Ogden School District for 1 year and then took his children to Park City School District. They moved because he wasn't satisfied with Ogden City School District. So the point is that companies are making decisions to locate in school districts, and I don't think any of them want their children to have a bad education. So they may not care if their child has to slap 8 mosquitoes, and so that mosquito abatement can give theirs away. They may not care whether or not the road is exactly as smooth as they'd like in the city that they live in, but they don't want to shortchange their children that they're taking the money from to build that facility. And I personally think that that's the poster child for the case you're making, Joel, of CEO moves to Park City. And so, but that would be a full board discussion. We ought to take a stand on it. We ought to let people come in and argue about whether or not they think that's right in the economic development world, and how does it set us up to compete against other cities, states, counties across the country. But I will tell you that I think if we made the statement in Utah that our children are going to have an exceptional education here, I think that's a bigger attractor of jobs than anything we could say. It's not a secret. We are 50% proficient in math, science, and reading. That's not good enough. And I don't think an employer wants to locate in a state where that's our banner.
And I'm going to briefly summarize what Spencer said and just say some more. if you look at Utah, we can fight for like, oh, the big Tesla battery pack or a Facebook data center. Those things are kind of cool. When we educate people well, they create their own companies. You look at the own companies that have been created in Utah and how they've exploded. Merit Medical is one of them. Those are the things that are really awesome and really create massive amounts of wealth and great jobs here in Utah, not competing, against 10 million other states. And the way we can create really good companies here is absolutely
Well,
education.
we wouldn't have wanted Amazon here, Joel, as you know, because they're a dirty dozen company. We heard that yesterday.
Distract me from the topic. I used to fall for bait like that, but I'm not going to anymore. Board Member Stokes, don't confuse issues.
Chair, do you want a motion that we go with the recommended action and have the finance, and have staff prepare a rule and bring back to the finance on this? I'd like to make that motion to do that, and also invite, included in that is put an invitation out to EDC Utah and the State Economic Development, whatever their title is, up there. I don't see very many of those guys around, to come to our next finance meeting, and we'll further this discussion on RDA, CDA evolution and our role.
Any
That's my motion.
Any discussion of the motion? I'll maybe just add that legislation that was supported by the state school board and our friends at EDC Utah would be a lethal support to get legislation passed on this.
That's right.
And
Before we throw everyone under the bus, let's get them here and have a conversation.
apparently someone on this board likes to do things effectively instead of just pontificating all day long about how clever they are. That's useful. I hope people in
Is
that
that me
area
that you're talking about?
support Chair Huntsman for his reelection bid.
No one's even running against it.
Maybe that's one of the reasons.
Don't lose.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Unanimous, thank you. Moving on. To 1.6, Deputy Jones?
So, Chair, for one,
1.3. Section carryover.
Yeah.
spend plan.
yeah, I think Ben Rasmussen needs to be present.
The dirty dozens.
Present for 1.6. So if we could go to 1.3, section carryover spend plans, this is probably gonna take, well, it's up to you, quite a bit of time. If the chair's okay with this, can we invite Deborah Jacobson to the table, your finance director?
Please.
And Jamie, you can come up here too. We have some minutes.
You can sit there.
Let's bring Tammy Faye too. I should be stressed. No, I'm not. If I lose, I win. I get to stay here with you guys.
Joel won't be here.
Oh, good.
I just want to know who's got the Scentsy candle over here.
Somebody has a Scentsy candle.
Chair, if I may.
Deputy Jones.
So this is a really very important process that needs to take place where finance committee members are advised on what the balances are by section or by program. It's very, cost accounting from the program perspective. We do recognize, your staff does recognize that this could seem overwhelming to you if you look at all the different sections and backups for the carry forward recommendations or plans that we're presenting to you. It might be productive if we allow a little bit of time for each one of the committee members to open these up and see them a little bit. I just need your guidance on, how deep do you want to go? Do you want to go in each and every one of the spend plans or or do you want to, us to make just high-level recommendations? Because ultimately what we're seeking the finance committee to make an action that the board approve all of the spend plans as we have done internally or created internally. There are available assistants, like Assistant Superintendent Voorhees is here. We can cover the financial ops part. I saw Talia over there for CTE, if you have questions about that. Aaron's here for data and statistics. So if there's specific questions on any or each of one of these spend plans, we can go down that road. I do have some actual higher level ones. I think it would be very productive if at the very least, we open up the board. Is that one, which one is that one titled?
First one,
Is it the first one? Okay.
First on the list?
Because that's your budget. Well, it's all your budget, but this is specific to,
So do all these numbers link with this card? Because I've not really felt that this is, no.
no, those are the object codes.
That's actual spending.
Well, how do you want to proceed, Chair? Do you want to give the Finance Committee members a little bit more time to go through each one of these? I think that might be productive if you gave them maybe another 10 minutes to go through them. That way, if there's any questions, we can answer those. And then we can revert to, just our high-level recommendations. So, again, just to summarize, what we're seeking is an overall Finance Committee recommendation that the board approve all the spend plans, subject to your review and any changes you want to make. Then two, we do want to have some specificity to, for instance, from your discretionary funds, like to, allocate another $600,000 like we have in previous years for capital improvements.
So as I'm looking through the notes, all of these items we have approved in the past and we have discussed. So now the only thing is that we are looking to is how to spend our carryover money or what's going to happen to that. Is that kind of a summary of what we're doing right now? So we can't really change any of the things on the line item. We could, but we're not going to because we already discussed them and agreed to them, right? Okay. Thank you.
In this case, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So if you take a little bit of time, because what we need to demonstrate is we're not just burning up money just to burn up money. We have a plan, but then also too that you as your Finance Committee representatives have had due course to really look into this. So again, if you wanted to spend a little bit more time, if you don't, that's fine. But I would.
Spencer?
You know what I'd rather spend time on? Sure. Because Joel and I, as he's pointed out, we're not going to be here, and maybe even could be just Mark Huntsman here as the Finance Committee. But I think we ought to figure out a policy on how to deal with this in the future. And so, Mike, if we're talking about things that are, as I look down this list, I'm assuming we're looking in the carryover column, right? So
Is there one are you on the main one, sir?
I'm on the main one, so the 2018 carry
This one
forward.
right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but some of the carryover is already obligated, so we can't even look at that. We have to look at the not obligated
Well-
column. Because the carryover and the obligations, there's not a surplus unless you're looking at the not obligated.
Okay, so it appears to me then that there's, if we go to the not obligated column, my view is that we have a superintendency and we have professional people who should be making, just like Alpine School District isn't equipped to make a decision on RDA or EDA. I don't think we're fully equipped to say, oh yeah, absolutely. I think we ought to spend $50,000 on this out of that. So what I would say is if it's over $250,000, we ought to look at it. If it's under $250,000, there's one in the 18 drink is what the title of that one. It's at the top of page 3, I think.
If I could expand on that. So there is, the policy that we're following right now is 50,000. So we had it, so along the line of your thinking, we've been together for a long time, so you remember 3 years ago where there was concern that staff were making decisions and not necessarily advising the board. So we established.
Staff we didn't trust as much.
And we appreciate this, and we had established it as 50,000. If we want to move the policy to higher, that's great, and but we would want you, or respectfully request that you do put that in front of the board as well, so that they're aware that in future iterations of this process that we would have a higher threshold, so to speak. The threshold has been 50,000 for the last 2 or 3 years.
I just know how we can get bogged down on
Sure.
something that we don't have any control over. I think we spent an hour yesterday on the Dirty Dozen. And I don't want us to get bogged down. I think we need to set every parameter we can to not allow us to get bogged down. I mean,
Sure.
And $50,000, it's like I tell, clients at legislature, the hardest bill to pass is a 2-page bill, because everybody can read it. A 300-page bill, they'll vote on that, and it's not even an issue, because only 2 people have read it, and they trust those 2 people. I'm just saying, I think we can get down in the weeds on a 30,000. We could get down in the weeds on this $1,289. I personally think we should take a look at everything over $250,000 or 200 or whatever the new threshold is, and because you can do significant things with 200, with something more than $250,000. In the size of budget that we have, you can't really do significant things with something under $250,000. I mean, in a one-time, you can't really create an ongoing program. You can't, And as you look down, if we take this and we say, okay, it's the not obligated column. The only things we have in the non-obligated column would be that 17 SAM, it's 328. This 18 drink, whatever that is. Okay, that was going to be my guess. Is big, and those appear. Well, let's see one more. There's the 16 CPLS, which I've got a guess for that one as well.
VASPO.
And the 18 CURA, and the 18 DRIE. I'd like to take a look at all the ones over $250,000.
They're available to open up as separate attachments, and that's why I was saying if you want to look at those, and if you want to just confine it, so to speak, to just those. I think that. Again, we were just making it based on the previous policy of 50,000 and making the sections provide you amounts of that. But if you want to do that here, that's great. We just want to be very transparent with you all so that you all see these, because we ultimately need that recommendation to the full board approve these plans so that we can proceed.
So just one, sorry, Linda, what's the total number in unobligated? If you were to run the total on that column, which it doesn't have it, I'm gonna take a guess and say it's somewhere between $8 and $10 million.
Have the sheet. You can just
I'm looking for it.
Ladies, I think it's maybe worth, it's 10:19, at 10:40, we're done, we're gonna take a break. This is as much time as we can give to it, so kind of prioritize what you think's highest priority. Karen, oh, wait, no, Linda, I'm sorry, Mark, Linda's been waiting.
So I understand your concern, Spencer, and it's, but I think we have to hit a balance because, years ago, not too many years ago, we didn't even have a finance committee. The board never saw any of this stuff. So we need to make sure the board's looking at it and there's some oversight, but I think we need to have balance. So whatever that balance is, whatever you guys feel the balance is, but I think we still need to see it, be looking at it. Just, it probably makes these guys feel better if we've seen it and look at it, because then they know that they're being transparent, so.
I agree with that.
Mark and then Kathleen.
And I apologize, I stepped out there a second ago, and hopefully critical time. And I'm in favor of just kind of leaving alone. We can choose what we want to look at, and those safeguards, that protection was there for a reason, and if we up the level, I'm not sure if that helped Deputy Superintendent Jones or what's happening there. But a question I have is on the not obligated carry forward. How much of this can we move out here and move over into kind of our own contingency and our own special projects or whatever we've got going on?
Great question.
Oh, that's my first question.
Just because he's the chair, you don't have to say it's a great question.
Well, if I don't say it's a great question, then I don't think it is a great question.
I think we should use all of the leftover for building.
But so that's a question I have, is some of these have restrictions on, we can't move them, so.
That's it, right. And we've noted that. You can see where we say it's restricted, so you can't move that. So that's another technique.
In the big column it says it.
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
Right, so, because last year you brought this up and we didn't have that level of detail. We wanted that level of detail, so we provided it to you this year, what's restricted and what, yeah.
But what's the total?
Of the unrestricted.
It's 14.2 million.
Unrestricted, not obligated.
14.2.
Because I
And then not obligated.
want to leave, if it's not obligated, we might as well move it to a place that.
Sure. So if I may, that is a process that we can take. And if you recall last year, we did this drill, but then subsequently in the board meetings, we said, okay, now we have this. Can we recommend to the board that you spend it on the unrestricted? And that's what's great about this process is typically by January, we've got pretty much everything encumbered. But then sometimes, projects come in for less than estimated, and so, we do that. So this is the first point of contact with this. It doesn't end here, it begins here. You like giving us that direction, say, okay, move it to it, and then each month we draw that down for what's necessary to do, if that makes sense. It doesn't just stop here. So I believe I'm with you, sir. I believe just how much do you want to drill down on this today? Where if you just give us the direction to move it and basically put all the unrestricted into one pot and then start making the recommendations on how to spend it, we can do that. It's not a...
Yeah.
We can't.
Kathleen
Or
and then
not move,
Spencer.
well, keep it in the...
Has to stay on the line
It
item.
has to stay in the line item, I get that. But I think what he's saying is to say, these are the unrestricted amounts in those line items, and here's our recommendation, that's legally used. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make it like one big pot. That's not what I meant. I meant just to display that instead of all of this, right? We can move that onto a sheet and say, by these line items, here's your unrestricted dollars there, and here's our recommendations to do that. But what we would need, and I can do that at your direction, whether you want us to, the challenge is that we really need the board's approval to move forward along those lines by way of your recommendation so that we can keep the momentum going. Does that make sense? Because if you say, well, bring that back to us in Finance Committee next month, it could be December, and then we've lost almost a half a year on the ability to execute those funds, which is not necessarily a bad thing because, again, it goes to the level of transparency and all that too that we're doing. So you know exactly where the money's going and what we've done. It's just the timing is a little bit challenging with the committee being after the board. I'm not criticizing that. I want to make sure I'm on the record. I'm not criticizing the thing for that. I'm just saying that just please, understand that that's just part of the deal, and that if you want that level of transparency and that detail to come back to you as just a finance committee member.
But we're gonna give you a recommendation today.
Yes, sir.
Won't leave you hanging.
Kathleen and Spencer.
So my next question was, if they're unrestricted funds and they're not obligated, where can they be spent? So now you've illustrated that they have to stay within the line item. So I'm gonna look at one line item. So the line items would be the green subcategories, the lighter green. So if I'm looking at teaching and learning and I'm seeing that there's 2 million there, no, 4, what would be their recommendation? Because I think the people that are involved in this line item should come to us with recommendations, because for us to come up with recommendations on how they can spend money in their area, it does not seem like an efficiency.
Those are the actual spend plans that you see attached that are
Okay.
behind this. This is all the detail, all in one
So can
place.
we go
So
to
down
that
here?
spend plan? Yeah, so see,
Okay.
so this is the main, what you're looking at right now, ma'am, is the main overall summary, right? And then, by
Each one
way
of
of all
these.
these attachments
Yeah.
in here are that, we did that.
Okay.
Just like you're saying, how do they wanna spend it? So now we can open that up for you.
Okay,
So which one is it labeled as?
PAH, the very last one.
Very last one. So see, great point there, I know.
Yeah.
Board member Stokes saying, quit saying great, Scott. So PH, teaching and learning.
don't validate it. Well, I,
So we opened that up,
Yeah.
so that you can drill down on it. You can see that you described the process we're indeed taking. And so if you as a committee say, we recommend that you approve these spend plans, we can do that. And then we keep you advised each month, periodically on how we're executing the fund.
so all these tabs down here are what they're spending their money on, and then this one tab is what they're gonna carry over money?
So each of the tabs at the bottom are the programs that fall within that appropriation
Okay, and then this CURA is the carryover.
for that particular program. So if you go to any tab, every tab that's on here has carry forward. And it will list whether it's restricted, obligated, and if it's if it's not obligated, they've listed a plan in the spend plan details.
So for your consumption, for the committee's consumption and the public's consumption, pleases the committee, let's look at 16 ARTW, right? Which I have open, it's displayed for you. If all the committee members will go ahead and click on that tab. So Deborah, explain to them.
This one is not, this one's kind of restricted, so
Okay, do
the
another
Cura
one.
budget,
Give
the
me one.
18 CURA is probably a better one. The one that we were on originally.
Yeah,
So you can see in the obligation detail, there was 31,900, that was the compensation shortfall that we had this year. So we've obligated to cover that this year. And then she's given a detail of what she would like to spend the rest of it on. The director has given her recommendations on what she would like to spend it on. And that's what we're seeking approval on.
Slow is smooth, so that's where I'm going. So what is our legal, how are we bound legally on this money? Let's say there is $14 million in unrestricted money, unobligated money. You're saying it needs to stay in the line items, but if the board votes to move it out of the line items, can it be done?
You can change, so a line item has several appropriation units, and we can move funding within the line item. So, for instance, PAH is part of, the line item is actually PAAA. And we've got PAJ, PAH, PAK, PA. So within that line item, we can move funding where we need it to be, but we can't move it from PAAA to PKAA. That requires legislation.
So can I ask the question? I'm as smart as Facebook, so I can figure out a workaround. 18 CURA has, I'm assuming that's $250,000 and not, there's a zero missing, I think.
Yes.
So $250,000 plus $50,000, that's 300, you're nearly at $400,000 there. That can't be moved out of the CURA.
Yes, it can.
It can
The
be.
CURA is the program that's within the appropriation. And the appropriation falls within a line item. It's the line item we can't cross.
Okay. So I was probably too not specific enough. So it cannot, let's say we create a BUILDING line item, and CURA is going to contribute to BUILDING line item. Can it do that?
No.
Well, it can buy cubicles.
It can be moved, so if you created a new program, if you decided that you wanted to pull this funding into your discretionary budget, you could do that because it falls within the same line item. But you couldn't take it from one of the initiative programs and pull the initiative monies into your discretionary.
Right, so what I want to know is, what is, well, first off, I want to know where that Sensi candle is, because I don't even come out straight, giving me allergies. But the second thing I want to know is, how much of that money can be, of this that we've got, you said $14 million, can be moved into a discretionary budget?
We'd have to go through and highlight for you what was actually restricted. There are some restricted pots that we wouldn't want to.
Is that, I mean, and I actually am being serious. I know that many people think that I'm not
No,
serious.
I'm
and-
following you, actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
But why would I spend $250,000 on new cubicles when I can spend that towards a down payment on a new building? That's gonna be, we have so much wasted space in this building that we're paying for. I think we actually saved money for the Board of Education by actually building a building that was the right size for what we are. You know, I mean, I walked down this hall and it's just empty rooms that we're paying rent on, right? Because we lease this building, or do we own it by now? What's that? We lease this building?
State owns it.
State owns it.
The state owns it, we're just playing the O and M now.
Right. So we've spent so much money in my 4 years here to Band-Aid all of this stuff. And it's frustrating because it says, in my mind, it speaks to the priority that the state has on education. And that's, we have buildings all across the state, that are owned that speak to the priority of that as well. So I want to know what the total amount of money that can be moved into the discretionary fund, and I'm willing to have that fight with the legislature. I mean, we have $14 million, if it's 14 million or 12 million or whatever the number is, if we have that discretionary money, I'd love to go have that fight with the legislature and say, we're living in a building that we have no really control over. And I thought it was comical yesterday, we were having an open public meeting that the public couldn't get into. All the doors were locked, at 5 o'clock, because that's the way, because we have no control over any of this ourselves, right? Best we can do is go get a doorstop. But I mean, if I were saying what's a priority, I would say that would be a priority for us. Because I love to have everybody have new cubicles in the 18 CURA, but that's a lot of money. I mean, well, it's actually $350,000 because is requested for furniture to set up a new conference rooms and replace aging furniture in offices and cubicles. And I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but
Is there still room for conversation?
Mark?
I understand your concern, but also Finance Committee and others, we've been aggressively working with the DFCM, and a challenge that we've had in this building, and I see the 250,000, I see some of this as a lot of money, but then when you look at addressing our employees' needs, and how we've restructured on the accountability side, I think it's been a good investment. There's still value in them 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now, whether you're in this building or the building. Go back to that. It has been a priority on the board, and we maybe the Deputy Superintendent Jones can speak to where we've been with the DFCM as an update, but we are heading to that better place.
Oh, I agree 100%.
The other side of it,
4
I'm
years
not
ago.
sure if we save money for a building, if we're, I'm not sure if we can even own a building.
Had no candles 4 years ago.
And how we would finance that, but I understand your concern.
But I think we could go, I think the legislature would like us to be the captains of our own destiny. And if we went to the legislature, and sorry, Joel, if we went to the legislature and said, look, we'd like to put in place a 5-year plan where we get to this space, and we're going to manage our money that we're given exceptionally well, and we're going to save up over the next 5 years to have a 5-year plan where we've set aside enough funding so that we can have an efficient building. I think they'd work with us. I'm looking at the next tab over, 18 Dread, which I think is hilarious because it's the driver's ed and it is Dread. But it doesn't have any spend plan details in. I get just assuming it's going to give that to.
It's because it's restricted.
That's restricted.
Okay, so
Legislation.
okay, I see there in the obligation detail. Okay.
Can I ask some questions? So I appreciate that people want to spend money on structures and betterment of their offices, but I also think that we could probably, I would honor any spend plan that any department has come up. I think that's where we should go first, because they have thoughtfully come up with what they have wanted. I would like to see a little bit of money in every department being dedicated back towards IT and a support person, because we look at our physical structures, but really what this whole building is, the whole institution is relying on is our IT infrastructure. So in my school systems, we have an IT department that doesn't really work with all the other departments, and so they say, oh, this is what we want, and it doesn't talk to everything else. So I would like to see that become part of a more, and I've said this before, I'd like to see this become part of the conversations more. That IT and each one of these line item departments have a plan to talk to IT, and if there has to be a more robust liaison associated with each department, I think that would be on my wish list. So I don't know what would be the structure for that.
So if I can speak to that, if part of the overall motion to have the board approve the spend plans, you can say additionally, and this would be what we would develop in subsequent months, to staff, evaluating and coming back to see, follow that lead. Say, went back to what was unrestricted, and section now can hire this person using funding. You can get into those details with us if you like. I mean, you can do that.
And I'd like to follow up too. I mean, I want to honor what their spend plans are, but I think we have a lot of backlog and we have a lot of overwhelmed personnel. IT is contracting out help. I mean, I would also like to see that every other department can move all of their workload into the done pile and start coming to their jobs with a more growth mindset instead of like I'm an over my head mindset. So those, could we use those unrestricted funds to help staff? Not with an FTE, but a contractual person to help maybe move them past stuff.
Potentially.
Those would be my two questions about their carryover monies.
Spencer?
This is what I'm talking about getting down in the weeds, and I am the worst. I would just tell you, I have no self-control. So I click on 15 month, and its obligation detail is blank, but down in the spend plan detail, it says restricted private grant funds awarded to LEAs and subgrants. Who's Hattie Monk? What's that all about?
That's an endowment that we actually get every year, and it's actually restricted for library.
Name's Hattie Monk.
I think so. I don't know that.
I
It's
believe
I
it's
think it's
a former individual, active, proactive in public education. I'm not sure if I have all the details. Susan, do you know about that?
I do.
Go ahead.
Hattie Monk was a former librarian. When she passed away, she left a large endowment that a percentage would go to the LDS Church for missionary work, and then a percentage would go to Utah State Board of Education. And it's specifically for...
Trust us as much as the LDS Church. Love that.
It's specifically for reference materials in secondary schools.
Does it have to be hard copies or can it be digital?
Originally it was hard copy, so we would buy encyclopedias. And in the last few years, in talking with the trust is located in Arizona, in talking with them, and with the information technology and everything else that's going on, we now have electronic reference materials for the schools, because that's what the students are using.
Okay.
Why I'm saying we need to have a $250,000 threshold. Because I could hear, this is just hypothetical, I could hear board members looking at that Hattie Monk money and saying, what kind of material are they buying? I would like to see the material, make sure that nothing has a pasty. And, I mean, I'm just saying, this is a rabbit hole I know we can go down, but we have a person, a private person who is giving us money, and we are providing reference material to libraries from the State Board of Education, and we have no idea what it is. So I would like to see the list of reference material that we have provided to libraries.
Off topic, out of order.
I would like to
now-
I'd like to make a motion.
I think we need to set a threshold.
Yeah. I'd like to increase the threshold to $100,000, and I'd like to continue that motion by saying that I'd like to approve all of these carryover spending plans with the contingency that we look to maybe increasing personnel on a contractual basis and also creating a conduit for IT to be a little bit more fluid between departments. Can I make that motion like that?
Yes. Any discussion to that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, thank you.
Hang on a second, did you say it was gonna go to IT?
With a conduit towards IT.
Joking.
Out of order.
That was a good question.
Board member
Scott even
Stokes is
said
not
so.
recognized.
But you didn't hear him.
Where's security here? I need their assistance. Still have my socks. 1.7. Ready there? Or are we on the bylaws? Yeah.
It's just up to you, sir. If you want to continue.
Still have 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. Yeah, I'm afraid. Yeah, we need a break, don't we? Okay, it's 10:44, 10:55, we'll reconvene. And we need to be done by noon.
Three, keep all private conversations
did you
outside.
already?
Spencer and Mark,
What?
they're still here.
Yeah, we're good. We're being really, we're fine.
What? I know, but all of them are on, so hopefully those people in the back are saying nice things too.
Listen carefully.
I'm gonna, after, I know there's side conversations about me, I'm gonna go get the recording and hear what people are saying about me.
I want to kind of do this, but boy,
You can look the stuff up.
Right, how are you?
A whole discussion about, a whole discussion about.
Oh, so you can? Did you cover it? Yeah.
IT, we can
Yeah.
certainly do that. There's
Yeah.
plenty of copies.
Yeah.
But I'm sure education. There's probably.
This is me speaking this.
That's what they have.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, just to help them get some.
Some get 100.
That was my
Some
mindset,
get,
you know. So,
alley that to the districts.
if I'm incorrect in that, anybody. Trying to just spend the money. I don't want to buy anything, I want to put my body in the earth. That's what my. If anybody is like, that jerk, just tell. No, because I totally get fish drinks, so they're really. I know it's free.
Yeah, you know, but it's an example, but
Yeah,
that we would
yeah,
have that option to
Yeah.
do that with.
Yeah.
That there just wouldn't be.
Yeah.
We could do what we
yeah, okay,
so.
yeah, all right. Well, that was my thought.
Possibility, is that really? Yeah, there's.
No, I am appreciative.
And then you know the other sections don't pay much. And this is still fairly new section. They've never had to do that.
You have had a big boom in their efficiencies because of IT, so I think it's
Some of, yeah. Some of them are telling me that.
awesome.
They're,
You guys are
they
great.
don't, you know, if they.
That's the
Couple
whole
building
thing.
departments, you know,
And that's what I always say.
So
We need to start supporting. All increments from every department.
It's just because.
I was just telling you, that was a great idea. The proposal we just put forth, we can maybe take off
Yeah.
9 million of asking.
Spence is looking for the candle.
I don't smell it. Do you guys just smell it?
It's probably his laundry soap.
It's it kind of smells like
His wife used to do laundry
pumpkin or
soap.
something like that.
I don't smell it.
I don't, you can smell it over there.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, it's like kind of, there's a
It's
scent there.
cami. I wonder if it's coming from the
It is
break
cami.
room. Or
Just like-
lotion or.
Yeah. I'm like, when I go to school, when I go to like a mall, my daughter's like, oh, let's go into that store that has, I'm like, I can't even go in there. I'm in there for 15 minutes. I'm like, Megan, here's $20,000. I'm just get out of here. Oh my God, it's like real overload. I can't stand the smells. It's just.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to me.
Actually, kind of, because we always try to guess, you
Yeah.
know, what's like the hottest concern, or what's really the concern, but
Yeah.
when you have.
Yeah.
And it's actually good, because you can't think of everything, you know, you can't think of everything. So when we're guiding the
Yeah.
sections, you know, what can I spend this money on? Sometimes we aren't saying that.
Yeah,
Around the hall. This isn't, I have to say, the empty space is good for something, because you can just walk around. I mean, it's just really good exercise.
Right behind it, you know, like they do with all the elementary.
We don't hold meetings on board day, so that it's not.
I just need a hole in the wall. That's just me.
I don't. Really bad down
I like the railings there, those are nice.
I'm not big on.
Hole in the wall.
We've got it working.
Alright, thank you.
No, just so that.
Did you find the candle?
No, but I found a lot of other things.
Yes. How sharp you look, you're such a dapper guy.
Yeah, there you go. That's my signature. So don't judge me for what I'm about to say, but did you watch the show? Did you watch this? Have you seen the show called?
It's not exactly.
I
mean, I get what
Thank you. Amy Poehler, and there was the one.
my kids
There's
love
a
it.
better way you want to do that.
I'll talk with it, but that, I think that.
The guy from Barney's that does the window.
Yeah.
Does the
Now I'm thinking.
he always wore a shirt like that.
Uh-huh.
And so when I saw it, I thought,
I look up
I
at
buy
like
that shirt because I
whatever.
And what's the bracelet? Tell me about the bracelet.
In detail.
I've been,
Yeah.
you know, since
Native
Quinn
Americans?
Snyder, no,
And then
Quinn
decide,
Snyder
and you can
wears
from
these.
those. So we
Those
can.
are, you know, the coach would do that. So I decided, well, she's cool, I'm gonna start wearing these. But these are from Amsterdam.
We just have to create our own.
This
It
is
says
the iris painting.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Oh, okay,
You can
yeah.
see the colors
Yes.
of the iris.
Yes.
My mother's favorite flower.
Spencer, you're so deep. I didn't know you were this deep.
Well, I'm too deep.
Quite shallow, and you have all the steps to do.
Yeah, no, I work to come across shallow. That takes effort.
$2 million. Right. They kept saying restricted.
Are you looking for the candle?
So I'm kind of confused. Do I? I did.
No, I smell it over here. It's kind of like a pumpkin candle. I agree. I'd like to get apple spice. It might be Candy's solution. Might want to.
I'll ask the ceremony. I'll just say so.
And just get some. That smells like pizza.
Yeah, well, that's because they're microwaving stuff in here, but we can go, this is.
Thankfully, it smells like a Scentsy candle right there.
I was like, and I'm like, I don't. As soon as you come in the door. Does it smell like a Scentsy candle or just something scented?
Like, come smell.
I'm so glad you were here. I'm like, I know it's an endowment and I know it's for library stuff. I don't know the details.
It's actually a very kind endowment, right?
Yeah.
Right here, you can really smell it. The detail.
Now I know the details.
Now you know the detail.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Oh, my, you don't. I'm sitting over here cracking up and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm straight and I'm sitting over here like crying.
I'm glad he thought that one.
Yeah.
You should show that one to Jamie.
I know. It was well, we saw things, just not sizable.
JP found some guys.
You found some of his eyes? He said this one's his favorite.
His favorite.
Oh, that's one of my favorite ones too.
What is that like? See,
They put eyes
like all over his cubicle.
This is in his office.
That was in your office?
No, in JP's in Palmer's office. They googly eyed various things while he was gone. Because you know that's what they do.
That's so funny.
The last time John laughed, we put him.
Yeah.
So that was Nicolas Cage's.
So did you glue those? Oh no, you taped them. Oh,
That is
you guys
so
are
funny.
you guys are nice. I'd be like dap dap choo choo. They're on there forever.
Not to say that I looked for glue, but we didn't have any.
That is so funny. Isn't that funny? We're at the school board. We don't have.
I was getting a little rowdy there.
We have no glue in the building.
I know.
Just saying.
I know.
Numbers.
No time.
I sat right underneath Natalie's office, you know that.
Uh-huh.
I can't really hear. Yeah, about 3 o'clock, I hear laughing, I hear giggling, I hear, I hear.
We have to, because then we're here until 9 o'clock at night.
I know, about 3 o'clock, you guys unwind in her office. It's a good time, that's all right.
And then we have to ramp up, so we.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I never hear anything except for the laughter. That's so funny. Oh, here they go again.
We're so busy.
You gotta run upstairs and join
We're
in.
either gonna laugh or cry.
That's right, exactly.
Because with doing 2 systems in 2 years.
Not-
Oh,
Yeah, I can go.
we're busy.
I don't render opinions on what the, sure they're following. Wasn't specific. Once we send it to them.
Yes.
That's the issue. So they say, oh no, you're.
Four of them, there should be four there.
Well, that's why it's there and not out in the library. They're protecting it. That used to have a lock on it, Spencer.
Did it?
I'm sure.
To keep that stuff out of kids' hands.
These are Civil War letters about
Could
someone
be,
who
could
served
be.
in the Civil War, and it's okay.
It's overwhelming. It looks
I
like
did.
right?
Yeah, but it
My
might
own
be a
dear
code.
sister, your affectionate brother Burgess.
The Instructional Materials Commission used to.
So like we were just talking about.
We were just out there snooping around.
Yeah, give love to all our relations, especially Dr. Craig Kissel, your brother Burgess.
I have concentrate on these
Oh, that's a good
that
thing.
we could have actually.
Well, there's a ton of them in there that.
My ancestor wrote that.
We're like, why are they, did somebody send out or they said, here's
It's
some
not
money
sure
for
if
the
either.
book.
It's instructional materials. So they send all this, they
I
send
have
all these,
never
they send all these.
heard of that.
They send all
That's right, Bill, that's it.
That might be some good reading.
It is a constant reading.
teachers, I mean.
Let's start, especially if you don't have
We're
to
gonna,
subordinate
so you guys
members.
know,
And
suggest that they do.
Oh, good.
Yes, we all do. We all have opinions. Okay. All right, so. I don't, I didn't just.
Oh, wait, I think Pat's out today.
the process with distributing money, and it's cumbersome, but it prevents.
It's, the thing is,
I know. This one could be one of those.
How you doing?
Good. You don't have a lot of opinion.
On the what?
Interesting.
that's not what's happening.
Figure it out and put it in there. I feel like if I put something in here, it's gonna explode.
There's a question with those.
Let's go by
Yes, the OSA.
new shoes.
It doesn't say them particularly, but it does bring that out and suggest, and that's This is the average of their
All that goes to audit.
Good to know.
Good to do that, because
That's the thought, that's beyond us. Just so you know, don't be surprised.
But I like the idea of policy. The policy, how should you be looking at?
Such a can of worms for me.
And what's
No. That's why we're here, to try to make it better, but you're.
That's right.
Thank
I
you.
just thought that would be
How's
something
the town
that
holding on? How's the city holding on?
we've been trying to interview for
Attorney receipts and pictures.
assistant city manager.
So, some people,
But I think she's gonna be.
Let's, start again, please. I think, I don't see our Attorney General here, so maybe we need to go to 1.7.
So you texted.
He's stuck up there until Angie can get back, so he's.
Okay.
It's fine, we have plenty of other stuff.
You know,
Better or worse to discuss. Deputy Jones, what do you think is the best thing to discuss next?
Hang on one second, sir. So I gotta get this back up on the screen. So we've covered, let's just take a quick inventory if we may, Chair. Covered 1.1, we covered 1.2, covered 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. We need Ben Rasmussen here for 1.6. So if we can go to 1.7.
Sure.
Your direction, I think that would be great.
We're at 1.6 now?
Well, 1.7, right? The 277, well, no, that means him too, doesn't it?
Jamie and I.
You guys can cover the 600 one? Okay, so Chair, if you'll invite Jamie Barrett to the table, and Natalie and Jamie will cover 1.7 with us, if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah, that's what he said. Stopping at 12.
So we're at 1.7 and we'll circle back to 1.6 when we have Ben Rasmussen.
Jamie's back.
Jamie, Natalie, can you tell us, why are we amending this?
So Rule Jamie Barrett, Minimum School Program Administrator. R27600 needs to be amended for two reasons. The first is if you scroll down to line number 367, we had language in here for the grants for unsafe routes. That program was eliminated at the end of the 2018 fiscal year. We no longer have that program.
Was that by an act of legislature?
It was.
They're getting better up there, I'm very impressed.
However, they then created a new program. So if you scroll to line 397, we have a new program called Rural Schools Transportation Reimbursement Program, which in statute says that the board needs to have rules around it in order to administer it. So from 397, that whole section is our proposed language for administering the Rural Schools Transportation Reimbursement Program. This transportation program is open to any LEA district or charter school who meets the criteria of offering transportation for the last 5 years and having a low income of 65% for their district or charter school. So in this rule, we put in that
65% what, poverty? Or free
yeah, economically disadvantaged, so poverty.
Huh.
And then they're able to get request reimbursement from the board for transportation expenditures that exceed anything that was already reimbursed through the to from school transportation line item.
Good idea, maybe we should do our whole transportation program this way.
So you mentioned, maybe I cut you off, but you mentioned that it's for charter schools. If we are a state that believes in choice and charter schools are these choices and open boundaries in every district school is a choice, are we providing the same transportation options for our open boundaries district schools?
So I want to address policy because that's what the legislature did.
Okay.
But what I think Jamie was probably about to get to is that the way that we have chosen to present the rule to you is to require those charters who qualify to be eligible for this funding to fill out the same reports and follow the same standards, if you will, as our district schools. So we will be evaluating their routes, their miles and minutes and routes in the same fashion that we do with our districts to ensure that whatever percentage they qualify for is at least reasonable and consistent with what our districts are having to do to achieve the same funding into the other form. So we're trying to make them as similar as possible. I will say that that's proving to be a challenge because that's not how bus transportation is provided in charter schools. And so it's a challenging aspect. One other thing I wanted to make sure we bring to your attention before I forget. So yesterday in the main board meeting, you approved a list of legislative requests. A problem with this bill that was addressed at the time it was drafted, but it wasn't corrected, is that it requires us to determine eligible schools. But we don't determine transportation or have any data based on schools. It's all done on the LEA level by routes. And so we need this statute changed if this funding, which this funding source will continue unless this portion is repealed, to make the determination at the LEA level, not by school. We're not able to manage it at the school level. And so just for your awareness, the way that we're managing the program this year is not entirely consistent with statute because we can't do what it's asking us to do. And to change it and make every LEA report things at the school level, that burden would be monumental. And we received significant feedback that that was not the route to go. So we have requested, and that was on your legislative list yesterday, to change this back to the LEA level, not the school.
So can I follow it?
Yeah.
So this only covers charter schools and not open boundaries in an LEA?
Tell me if your definition of open boundary is the same as ours. What do you mean by that?
So like if I'm supposed to go to Granite Elementary School and I decide I want to go to Canyon View Elementary because I feel it's a better school and that's the choice I've made, I should be provided busing under this. And if I'm at a school that has 65% low poverty, then I should be provided with the busing in my open boundaries of an LEA if I'm getting busing for a 65% poverty school as a charter. Am I accurate in these statements? Because that's what it sounded like to me.
Our response to the drafter in the bill was what you indicated, that we have an apples to oranges kind of situation here. Currently, no. At a school district, we do not allow those routes. So those are school of choice routes and they're not funded for to from because they're not technically to from. And that's one of the issues that we're kind of running into with trying to fit the way that this one specific charter school is qualifying for these funds into these reports is that their routes are very long and they cover a couple of counties because of the school of choice issue.
Do you mind if I ask which is the charter school and who's the maker of the bill? Sponsor of the bill?
The charter school is Pinnacle.
Uh-huh.
So a copy of the bill is in Board Docs. We gave you a link to the bill.
This is like an anecdotal story, but the people that live up in Big Cottonwood Canyon and the people that live up in Little Cottonwood Canyon have struggled with busing for years. And they are actually in the boundaries of their home schools, but the school districts are now contracting out their busing because it's too expensive and they don't want to run a bus up there. So this almost flies contrary to exactly what's happening in our districts when there's also an Alpine school that doesn't receive busing, it's contracted out because it's up a little canyon. So I just think that what's happening in our districts is actually opposite of what we're trying to accomplish for this charter school. So that's just anecdotal. Thank you.
Amy.
What else to say? I mean, school districts have to fill out A1 transportation reports, which are based on eligible miles and minutes and routes. We will then have to have any eligible charter schools for this have to go through that exact same process. We're trying to compare apples to apples as just that we're hoping that with doing this that we will try to meet the requirements of the statute with that one statutory change with getting it based on an LEA level rather than school level. Other than that, this operates very similar to our current practice.
I think we're ready for a motion.
So the motion is to accept this change? Or
to move it forward.
To move forward, okay.
Our 277-600 forward.
Well, we don't really have any other options. Right. Okay.
That's the problem with this job.
Yeah.
That's why some people want to go to legislation instead of.
Well, yeah.
600 forward as, it's not being continued, really, it's just being amended. And on first reading, and ask the board to approve it on second final reading.
Thank you, Linda, for helping me with my motion.
You're welcome.
And well, it's all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think we can put this on the consent agenda, unless anyone objects. So can we please note that? Please put it on the consent agenda for next month. Deputy Jones, do you want to do 1.8?
Yes, sir. So if you'll invite Deborah Jacobson back up to the table, in case there's questions about the closing package. But what I would like her to do is just to summarize what the process is, so from hearing close, and how we arrive at this, and what it means to the overall CAFR, and what requirements are placed on her and Natalie's staff for the. So can you just talk to them a little bit about that, Deborah, orient them to how we arrive at this closing package? I've got it displayed.
This is the actual package that we submit to state finance in order to consolidate into the overall state CAFR. When we close, we have to basically reconcile each individual line item. And so you'll see here, the PAAA line item, that's really our biggest funding line item. We have to break out every single funding source, the expenditures spent in that funding source, and give the unexpended balances for that funding source. We account for indirect cost. Those are the numbers in red at the bottom of each line item. Those are the funds that are transferred to another line item from the legislature to fund our indirect cost. One thing to point out here, so most of our funds are non-lapsing. You'll notice in PAAA, we do have a column for lapsing funds. Typically, the funds that we're lapsing there are, for instance, our federal mineral lease. They appropriate us a certain amount of funds every year, but we don't always collect that amount. So we have to account for what was actually appropriated, what we actually received, and then we lapse the amount that we didn't receive out, giving us our remaining balance for the year.
So what this does though ultimately, and it goes to the discussion that occurred earlier on the carry forward balances and the line item appropriation. So perhaps I should have put this ahead of, so that you can see. So we'll do that in the future. We'll make the closing package and then we'll do the carry forward balances under the new thresholds as long as the board approves, et cetera, et cetera. Thing is though that what we would like to do is demonstrate to, and again, our journey over the last 3 years has been one, and we want to know, board members articulating this, public to know how we're closing, that we're balanced, and that transparency on how much was expensed for particular line items, so to speak, and that the staff would seek that the finance committee, even though the timing of this is the package has been approved, that you, by way of action, support the closing package as demonstrated today to you.
Martin and Spencer.
When does this get submitted to the state?
So the closing date for the state is usually like the first week of August. It's August 3rd. And we were a little bit late this year. And so, but that's the target date for the state. This, I believe, I'd have to double check, but I believe they issued the CAFR, they finished the CAFR last week. That's when it's actually published.
Okay. So we're basically, this will, for transparency reasons, it's going to move this forward to the board. When will you submit this?
It's submitted.
It's already been submitted.
Yeah.
It's done.
Timing though, that's kind of the challenge with this is submitted, and then we just want to make sure that the board knows that when that CAFR is released, that this is your piece in it.
Chair, can I follow up? So with the state, it doesn't require us to approve it. It's just that it's out there. So it's this just, the motion would be that this, move this to the full board, and it's not, it'll be in the consent, but it's not actionable.
FYI.
This really should have been an information item, not an action item.
It
Should have been an information item.
So, okay.
And it should be an information item though for the full board. So here's where the discussion took place. Is it, maybe we can get some clarity on this. If something needs to go into the consent calendar from a committee, then does that necessarily mean that the committee has to say, by way of majority or full consensus that it's in there, or can we just move it? That's why we went back and forth between action and information based on these other developments about what gets into the consent calendar, by way of the committee process. So if the committee just wants to say, no, go ahead and just post it as an information item to the consent calendar, that's fine. We didn't change the action item because of that. So that's a good point, but we were just wanting to make sure that if you as all five of you said, yeah, move it into the consent calendar, that we were following that recently developed process. I hope that's not too complicated.
It's nice for the chairs to know that, so when staff is talking to them, they say this is not actionable, but on it before the full board in that packet or here, so they can do that destination to. Chair.
The one other thing that I wanted to add is later this afternoon, when you have your separate USDB meeting, we requested that they put also their financial statements and their carryover for your consideration and for transparency purposes. USDB has separately presented financial statements. They are rolled up as part of the CAFR, right? But they have discretely separate statements.
They are a component unit of the state, and so therefore they actually generate actual financial statements.
So they didn't actually put their closing package in, they only put their financial statements in on the agenda item. But we have asked them to also discuss their carryover. Just like us, you're responsible for their financial presentation. They're closed as well. Again, it's back to the timing and transparency issues, but we requested that information be considered in the board meeting this afternoon, just like we're doing it here.
Answer. So just as a question, what rises to be a line item in the closing package? Just for example, the underage drinking prevention program. How does it make it into a line item of closing as opposed to Upstart or ProStart or whatever any other things the legislature directly?
This is where the legislature actually appropriated the funds. They decided which line item it needed to go to.
But aren't there, I think they do a line item for ProStart too, don't they?
The line item for the initiative programs is PKAA. That includes Upstart, ProStart, CHIP.
Software, the learning reading software.
All
the board.
It's the funding,
Carson Smith.
it's the funding code that they put on it, so you know where it's coming.
The legislature looks at the line items. They look at, the overall of each line item, so.
I just was trying to figure out what rises to the level of getting its own, like the underage drinking.
So I'll just answer your question. So there's actually a chart of account structure that's established between the LFA and state finance, and that's a great question because sometimes programs get their own line item, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're rolled into the office budget, and that's why The restructure that we put together with the programmatic codes has made such a difference in the last year or two. Is in the past, if it didn't have its own line item, it kind of got lost in the mix. And so I'm sure, I wasn't here for the carryover, but I'm sure you scrolled through lots of programs and looked at lots of lines. I looked at all of them, I know. But in the past, we didn't have that clarity and we didn't have that tracking. And it's made our jobs a lot easier. It's still big, but it's made our jobs a lot easier and easier to track things.
Linda, did you have any more questions? I've taken over being the chair.
No, I'm doing things.
Okay.
But I noticed Ben Rasmussen's here now, so.
Any further discussion on this 1.8 closing package report?
I would move that we place it on the consent calendar as a informational item only.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much. 1.8 done, 1.7 done. Should we circle back to 1.6 now?
If you invite Ben to the table, sir.
Ben, please join us. Ben, what's the matter with our bylaws? Why do we need to change them?
So staff received some feedback that we needed some direction as to how to handle unsolicited vendors that are received by board members from time to time. There was actually a recent
board members?
Board members and staff. Here we're particularly dealing with board member aspect. We'll be coming back with some amendments to the rule next month that will further inform staff as well. But essentially, there was a new law passed that deals with how an agency handles receiving unsolicited proposals from vendors. So we've proposed doing two things in the bylaws here for board's consideration. First would be just adding a clarification that if there is a request to add something dealing with an unsolicited vendor to the board agenda, can't add it to the agenda if it doesn't comply with the law. I think that's kind of common sense, but just specifying that. The other thing is saying that if a board member receives an unsolicited solicitation from a vendor, they refer it to the director of purchasing, who's going to handle it in accordance with our rule.
Well, this is.
So Linda and then Spencer.
We receive them all the time. You know, and so in email and all over the place. So I don't know that we want to send all of those to the director of purchasing to review and process.
Well, what the statute lets the director of purchasing do is tell them, no, we're not going to consider this. We have to consider it. It's not going to require great work from staff, I don't think, to.
Right now, I just delete them.
Y'all
I have to forward them on.
Y'all are gift
So
cards
this is-
the other day.
I think this is an important point where we need to define, I mean, back in the day before email, right? You had basically what amounts to, respectfully, door-to-door salesmen, right? They would come in the office. Now, I'm inundated by at least 6, 7, 8 emails. Say, hey, Scott, we can solve all your problems, you know, can I meet with you, right? And so, and this is probably my misunderstanding of the scope of based on my training in another environment, which is the police is that an email does amount to an unsolicited proposal, but the response to it, we're not required to respond to it. I think, you know, am I wrong about that? Or, you know, if you'd invite Zach up, I think this is a beneficial piece to this. Because I think Board Member Hanson's right. If I'm getting those emails, I know you are. And that's, you know, to me, it never made sense that, you know, is it a forcing function that if I get an email, I have to turn every email over to, that's why we need the rule, which Ben articulated too.
And I think if you have a rule that Zach is reminding them of that says we don't entertain these proposals,
Then
you'll start to get fewer of these proposals over time.
Deputy Jones or Ben, can you identify where we've had a problem with this? Is it just proposals? I mean, is someone, I've been on board 3.5 years. I've never seen Mark or Linda or Spencer. Have you seen a problem?
Well,
I'm thinking of a situation right now in my head.
So I'm not sure if I've seen a problem, but I am seeing potential problems. What I mean by that is if a vendor approaches me, says, hey, I've got this great idea on how you should, display your financial data, right? Then my modus of operandi is to just turn them over to Zach, is to say, I can't speak on behalf of my board and I can't enter into any kind of meetings with you. Lately, we've had some situations where we've gone into ability for vendors to come and basically demonstrate their product. And I thought some of the catalyst behind this was also the recent message that was sent, and I'll just call it a message if that's okay, that vendors would be referred to us or to the board that typically might have approached legislators, right, public ed type. So I think that's what we're really just trying to clearly define here is, if I get an email, I have been forwarding them to Zach, but then I think, man, that's, he's got to respond to all these emails. So if I'm doing it and all the board members are doing it,
We all got the
then it
same
becomes a
email.
staff capacity issue, that it's like too. So I think that's what we're trying to go to is to get the rule to say that, if a vendor emails me, I can delete it. I don't have to, I think that's where we're headed. But then the bylaw, which we're focusing on here, was to try to get to a consensus or by way of a vote of you recommending to change the bylaws on what that would mean for you as individual board. So the bylaws are your bylaws, but then staff have policies too. I hope that makes sense. So.
Ben, sir, then I have something to say.
Maybe I was misunderstood last meeting. I feel like anybody can call me and talk to me about anything, right? Because I'm one of 15 people and I feel like it's my obligation to respond to. So if I get approached by somebody, I'll sit down and listen to them. That's about the extent of it. Because let's not forget, this is a bureaucracy, right? So you can sit down with me all you want and it's going to probably amount to nothing. What I was talking about last meeting was, and that's why I asked this question, what rises to the level of having a line item on why does underage drinking get a line item by the legislature and ProStart does not? What I was saying was, last board meeting, legislators appropriate, when the full legislature appropriates money, it has risen to a much different level than normal. And I get hit all the time by legislators who fought to get something appropriated. And I'm put in and Scott knows this because this was one of Scott and I's first love fests when I first got here.
There was a lot of love.
A lot of love, a lot of great questions, a lot of love. I get put in between as a board member. It's a year and a half. The state board we appropriated this a year ago. Why is this not done? And I'm like, I call here and then I get this answer, which is not going to go over well back to the legislator. But they're not going to call you and complain. They're going to call me and complain. They're going to call Mark. They're going to call Kathleen. They're going to call all of us. Or they see us at an event. What I was trying to say is, something rises to the level that has been appropriated by the legislature. I feel we should give it a higher level of attention and proper care and feeding. Because at the end of the day, as you've heard me say over and over, we're meaningless in this process. We're at the grace of the legislature, the 104 people up there. So for us to focus a little more attention on items they would like, I feel like that's a good thing to do. That's where I was coming from. I would like to see us handle those things so that the next time I see them at a meeting, and it could be like yesterday morning was a 7:30 a.m. autism breakfast, and I saw a handful of legislators. Did they ask me how I was doing and what's going on? No, their very first things out of their mouth are state board questions, you know? So that's why I'm saying, let's, as a board, focus on some of those things. That was my.
I see these things like board members, don't do this. Board members, don't do this. But what if a board member does do it? I mean, then they laugh, they get a negative Facebook post. I mean, I just, you know, I mean, our ability to enforce our current bylaws has been called into question, I think, severely in the last few months. So I just don't see why we go down this, you know, kind of imaginary land that violations of bylaws are enforced. So we're going to go Kathleen, Natalie, and then you.
So a couple of years ago, we all were a little shocked by some vendor bills that came out of legislation. So now it's moved down the pike to the board members. And as we look to have local control, I don't think the state board should be looking to solicit vendors to us, because we're really not the people who should be purchasing items for our schools. I think that this is a great thing to put in place, because when you are approached, and as Spencer has mentioned, we are only here for 4 years or maybe longer, but we would be nice to have things in place to say, if this happens, this is what you can do. I can't see that taking away somebody's opportunity to entertain a new item should be taken away, but to put into place that this is the path you should take. If you're getting unsolicited vendors, you just forward them to this department. So does that make sense? That I don't think people understand, like, because when I'm approached, I'm like, oh, okay, they want to talk to me. No, they don't want to talk to me. They want to talk to the school board member, and I should be more made aware of that ahead of time. So that's what my thought process is about this, providing some guardrails for new members to understand that this is not the way we should be doing this. And then I don't see anything in here that prevents me from talking to someone. Is there something in there that prevents me? Okay.
Because I'm hopeful that if we can adopt this, we can also adopt that constituents may not talk to us either.
I hate to Spencer. I'll just say, right, I'm struggling to vote for this right now. And I think this is almost Alice in Wonderland stuff. But Natalie, and then you, and then Linda.
So I think the problem that we're trying to solve, and I think it's getting caught up in emails and discussions, is that oftentimes vendors approach board members, and they think because they've talked to a board member that then they call us and say, okay, we need to be on your board meeting because your board member approved us to do business with you. And we're like, you can't do that. Like, there's nothing, and I don't think that the intent of this bylaw is to tell you as board members that you can't have conversations. Yeah. Like that's not the intent. And that's the other part of the bylaw that I don't think we've discussed, is it talks about the executive committee may not add an item under subsection that violates a controlling or federal, state law or rule. So oftentimes vendors speak with board members, they talk money, they talk terms. If those vendors come and make proposals in an open and public meeting, no one on the board can serve as part of the RFP committee, right? I mean, if we can't, and there's a whole section of procurement code that talks about making sure we have fair, competitive opportunities for all vendors. If it's something, or if there's a problem that we're trying to solve and we want to procure something to do that, there's nothing wrong with putting the terms and conditions together and having vendors come and give us demos, right? Our procurement department puts together demonstrations, question and answers, bidders conferences, so that all vendors have equal opportunity. And there's nothing wrong with giving people some things we want to see and letting a group come in and provide a demo. That's exactly what we did with state purchasing and the grants management system. And that first level demo knocked a whole bunch of people out of the gate to the point that we didn't even have to consider them for the rest of the RFP. They didn't do what we wanted them to do. And so I think what we're trying to do here is create conditions where if there's a need or a problem that we're trying to solve, we do it appropriately so that we can move quickly. A lot of the things and a lot of the problems that we run into is that staff or the board members hook up with staff and we get all the way to the end of the row and they show up at purchasing and go, here's who we're going to use. And we're like, you can't do that. You have to go through an RFP process.
I would like to know one time that's ever happened. I want to hear one of those. I want to hear an example.
I had a situation with driver's education within the last year where they had subcontracted information out to a third party without going through procurement. I mean, if you want to see it, I think Zach could give you a big long list.
To the board.
I think that our interaction with the last company we just talked to would be Lucid.
But they contacted us, we did the right thing, we contact you guys.
Yeah.
As you know, I've never been in a situation where I felt like I've had less ability to do anything than on the state school board, which is the reason I'm not running again.
Okay, hear from Natalie. Thank you. You have to raise your hand in this committee. But you.
No, I don't.
even
We've
if
already
I
covered
completely
this,
agree with your
Joel.
point.
We've already covered this. You don't have control of a subcommittee. We've already gone over that.
Your turn. Thank you.
Just to provide a little bit more context with this, in the past, we haven't had any code or rule that dealt with unsolicited proposals. In the last legislative session, we actually had section 712 that was added that actually expressly permitted unsolicited proposals. During the whole process, the code section was changed multiple times. The current state says it is only for public-private partnerships or for infrastructure and health issues. But we think that that has opened the door so that unsolicited proposals can be submitted at any time, and there's a whole lot of extra work that can be required for those unsolicited proposals. In that code section, we also have the provision that we can choose to not entertain those unsolicited proposals. The code section right now does not have a lot of clarification as far as what would be required for a vendor to claim that they are submitting an unsolicited proposal under that section. But that's one of the reasons why we want to just kind of make our rule that in certain situations, we just won't entertain these unsolicited proposals. Because of the situations like Board Member Hanson was mentioning, when you get spam email, would that be considered an unsolicited proposal that we have to deal with, or because it's not directly related to public infrastructure or a medical health collection, that we could just delete that? Or so that's why we want to just be that proactive and kind of clarify at least what the board's position would be on unsolicited proposals.
Let me say a few things, then we'll go to Ben, and I think Chair Huntsman had something. Spencer, are you fuming over there? Do you need to say something?
Oh, yeah, I am fuming. I was gonna stick around to hear what Chair Huntsman said, and then I was gonna leave.
I'd be concerned about that. We're gonna go with Ben and then Chair
Maybe in
Huntsman.
January you should be. I'll be nice to you until then.
We'd call on Linda over
Yes.
if she could speak.
Linda, excuse me.
So, yeah, that's my big concern. If, I don't want to increase our workload or your workload, you know, if all of us are getting the same spam and we all send it to you and say, here's the unsolicited, then you're gonna have to go through them all. And I just want to make sure that it's,
What's the role of a board being a public servant? I mean, serious, this is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard.
But sometimes it's just spam we're getting from, like I said, from.
You better read
so
every one or
you-
you're violating
and-
the bylaws.
And is it, and that's the other
You better
question,
forward it
right?
too. You better check your spam box, and, because if not, you're violating our bylaws.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering, if that seems right. I don't have a problem with, I talk to constituents all the time, Spencer, you know that all. But I just don't wanna make Zach's job so much harder, and so that's just, I just want it to be clear so that we know what we're doing.
Chair Huntsman.
Okay, I promise this will be really short. Here's the present situation. 2 or more board members say they want something on the agenda. You guys know your bylaws? What happens?
It has to be put on the
It
agenda.
has to be put on the agenda.
Not an agenda, not necessarily the next one.
On an agenda. So it'll either go to full board, or I can assign.
We saw that
No matter what,
yesterday.
it goes, no matter what, it goes on, well, we've seen it in a lot of cases, no matter what it goes on. 2 or more board members wants to have a presentation from a vendor. But I've talked down board members that have wanted to, I want, this is so cool, I want this. Or I want this person to come to support this, but they're a vendor. You know, and I'm like, okay, I want to protect ourselves from ourselves. When I take a look at this, I'm sitting there going, this F, a board member receives from, on the vendor side, it actually protects us for a couple reasons. Is we have to be really careful what we do in procurement. And if all of a sudden this, whatever it is, and it's out there, and they got to be before the board, and then the board takes actions, okay, we're gonna go down this path and that, it gave that vendor a competitive edge or advantage or a leg up on the proposal side. So I see this as a way to protect the board from themselves, to mostly on the, well, there's a couple things. A selfish reason is because of time and the best use of time. But the biggest one is on the procurement process and lawsuits, and nobody wins when vendors start suing for that advantage. The problem I do have is who's going to protect the executive committee on that number 3, where the board executive committee may not add, it doesn't say shall not, but may not add any item under subsections 1 and 2 that violates a controlling federal or state law or administrative rule. I don't know how many attorneys I got to have on staff to protect the executive committee from this, to make sure we're not violating some rule. That piece bugs me a little bit. I'm not sure what the remedy will be, but I can see the advantage of having something in board rule on vendors. And if it does move forward, that it'll be an interesting conversation with the full board. So I try to keep it short, talk as fast as I could. I throw that out too.
I'm not leaving because I don't have time.
Oh.
I'm leaving because I'm pissed off. That's not.
Well, thank you for staying out for here.
Right. Spencer, do you have any parting comments, or, I mean.
Well, I just.
Let me just say where I am first. I am probably okay with B3, because I appreciate that pressure on the executive committee and some other things. But I look at F, and I just, this just blows my mind. I mean, from a legal perspective, any unsolicited proposal from a vendor, I'm now liable for potentially going through my entire email, I'm having a party. I was at the YouTube conference down in Provo a couple of weeks ago and talked to several vendors there. And I mean, do I need to now report that? What if I hear an unsolicited proposal from a vendor and I think this is the worst product ever? I don't think anyone should ever waste time on this. Doom, I'm done, and I don't report it to anyone. Now I violated the bylaws. I mean, this is nuts. And I can't imagine myself supporting that right now. So we can have this discussion, but that's where I am. Ben?
I think maybe some of the concerns that are being raised could be made by an easy fix to that paragraph F. If we simply changed shall to may, then if it was a situation where it was something that the board member wanted staff to consider, wanted the board to consider, they could refer it to the director of purchasing and he could follow the provisions of the rule. But if it's something like spam, like board member Hanson's talking about, you can hit delete and it's not going to be a problem. You don't have an affirmative duty to search your spam for this. But simply make clear that if this is a proposal that we want the board to give consideration to, this is our procedure. The board member may refer it to purchasing.
I'm okay with that. Jason?
Just to add another point of clarification, section 712 actually defines unsolicited proposal as a written proposal for a public-private partnership for an infrastructure project or a project to collect, analyze, and distribute health data to improve health and healthcare, to facilitate interaction regarding health and healthcare issues, and that is not submitted in response to a solicitation.
That's good, but we don't want to get into that kind of definitions in our bylaws. I mean, that's outside of our bylaws, and our bylaws don't refer to that. Well, I guess it's in accordance with section, is that unsolicited proposal defined 63G 6A?
Correct, 712.
I don't like referring to statute in our bylaws, though.
But we aren't referring to statute in our bylaws. If you see how that's written, we're telling them to comply with our procurement rule.
Oh, no, that's different.
This is, we provided the draft 2 today at the direction of the superintendency. That's what Deputy Superintendent Jones has up there. The way this is proposed is we're telling them, you refer to the Director of Purchasing to comply with our procurement rule.
Why don't we just say the director person comply with the board's procurement rule? I guess we'll do several.
That's what it's saying.
Take the shall and make it a may, though.
Yeah, that would be an option if you're worried about bombarding staff or you're worried about putting that large affirmative duty on a member.
Creating an affirmative duty.
Shall, can I have a motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, we changed the word shall to may in draft 2 of the bylaw change, draft 2F.
Okay. Any discussion on that amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes.
Opposed?
Any opposed? Or opposed? All right. It passes.
You never came back to me, asked if I had any parting comments. I think that we all ran to be elected, and we have a different duty than you have. And you're not going to tell me who I can talk to and who I can't talk to. Even if I'm, because I've never been on a committee to actually, has any board member served on a committee to
RFP?
an RFP?
Yes, I
You
have.
Well, shame on you. Why are you doing that?
It's
But
exhilarating.
the fact of the matter, I've never served on one of these committees. And our role here as board members is to deal with public policy, what we think are good ideas. It's the same reason I have a problem with the earmark process going away in Congress. Because it takes 10 to 15 years to, am I being asked to shut up again?
No.
10 to 15 years to get
Said it out loud.
an idea through into any kind of government. So what did we find? We found when we went into Iraq that the Hummers didn't have steel plates underneath them. And IED, what are they called? IEDs were blowing up underneath the Hummers and killing our servicemen. So vendors came to Congress and said, we can fix this situation. But it would have taken the United States military 10 years to have gotten metal plates underneath Hummers because we had to go through the procurement process. I believe we have a responsibility to try to have a program delivered to a sixth grader before they graduate. And if I feel like there's a vendor out there that ought to be heard from, I'm going to go to somebody and say, hey, we should have a presentation on this. Now, granted, once again, we have no power because we need to get funding from the legislature, but I just think this is I think there could have been a better way of handling putting this on the agenda. And if this was a direct response to what I said last meeting, it was off the mark of what I said last meeting, because it's not what I was asking last meeting. And so.
We had this assignment a couple months ago, so I don't think it is.
Okay. But it's this notion of, we can set up so many bylaws, and my frustration is how this is being handled mainly by the chair, less about the staff, but I wasn't going to be able to, say my piece. But the fact of the matter is, we get approached all the time by people, all the time, and we rarely say anything to any of you, any of the staff. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get approached. And if I'm going to be in violation of some board rule because someone has approached me, then why don't we just put in there, no one can talk to us and we can become judges. But that's not what we are. We're political. We're elected.
Spencer, that's why we put the may. So now it's really benign.
Yeah, but it shouldn't even be in there. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
And I will come with any argument I can to the full board to try to have, I hope this isn't on the consent calendar, it wasn't unanimous, to say, why are we adding more things just to have staff tell us what we can and can't do? Have me come in here every time with, my hands tied behind my back, and I'll come in and be a public servant.
No. I don't know if I'm willing to take this to the full board. I mean.
Well, it's passed out of here.
Mark, do you think this
We
is,
just passed the amendment.
we just passed the amendment, we haven't passed
Okay.
to bring it on. Chair Hudson, where are you?
Well, I think where you're at on this, you need to take the amended motion to a vote and see where you go, because I think you already know where two people are at. You're at the same place, say no, and then it doesn't move. Or somebody can.
I think that
or
improved
somebody
it.
can take their, withdraw their motion.
But, well, no one's made a motion to take it to the full board yet. So,
Then it doesn't move.
I mean, I just think we have better things to deal with at the board level. I guess this doesn't worry me enough. I haven't heard enough compelling case.
There's already lots of teeth in the state code about if you find out that I've talked to somebody and I've pushed it forward and I'm trying to wiggle it around so that my buddy gets the thing. There's already plenty of teeth in that.
I'm gonna call the question. And, well, I'll just make the motion. I move that we send this amended version with the May on to the full board. All in favor? Those opposed?
No.
Nay. Okay, that's unanimous, no. We're done. I think we have limited time. Do we have a hard stop at noon for something?
Yeah, we got a
So we have-
meeting.
Yeah, but it doesn't start till 1:15.
I know, but
Like a 20-minute drive.
1.9 training videos.
I don't know.
crap.
Do you want to wait for that for next? I mean,
I've actually watched all these training videos and they're very exciting. I've learned a lot as a teacher. I've been subjected to, voluntold to watch these and I had to pass on all of them and they've been exciting.
well, and my question, if you want to, I'll tell you what my question is. I've been in lots of meetings where they talk about the appropriations we've gotten from the legislature for training, and they say, "Oh, we'll just make a video and put it on our website." And so I was with Jennifer Lambert. Jennifer's not here, but she said that she said we counted them one day, and there were 240 mandatory videos, and nobody can watch that many videos. And so that just made me wonder if it's being useful to just put them on the website. I was also at a meeting where somebody looked for one and couldn't find it. If they're indexed, do we know if people are actually using them and if they're beneficial to people just to put them on there? Do people know that they're there? Do teachers and others know that? So that was my question.
So as a certified teacher, I now, to start my job, I had to watch 5 of them and they totaled like 4 hours. So it was part of my contract. And I think that anybody can link a certified teacher to a video and say, this is part of your job, please get this done in a timely fashion. So I was given like 160 days to watch these 5 videos. And I think that when we go to UPAC, and these videos have outlined specifically what the law is with vignettes about which is appropriate, which is not appropriate. One of them covered FERPA, one of them covered testing ethics, and then another one was about child abuse. So I don't think everybody has to watch the 240. I think it is, as it states in the background, it is a good use of time, and so it's not causing everybody to be here. So I think that they were useful. And of course, you don't want to do any training on a video if you don't have to. But it was a kind of a convenient way to do it.
My question when we talked about
The alternative is worse, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the alternative is first, but my question is, do teachers know that they're there? Are they, like you said, if they're sending them to those specifically?
Yeah.
But if our staff is just making a video because they thought, oh, this is easy, and they're putting them online, are they being indexed? Can someone go to an index of all the videos and find them? I mean, that was a suggestion. Somebody said, it might be nice if we had some kind of an index so people can find them all. Anyway, I just wondered if that was a good use of our money, and I'm, and we can discuss it more later if you don't want to discuss it now.
Chair.
One of the challenges, and I'm glad this was on here, I'm not leaving because I wanted to speak to this a little bit. Videos are really important, but we're in the compliance business also. What's really important is videos are almost like books. Who vets the video? When does it become antiquated? So you end up with almost a compliance person that regulates what we endorse. And if we're endorsing something, do we have that? Whether it's there's online training videos that are ours, and then we can give reference to some. The question I have, and this is what's happening in corporate America, and now it's coming into the government, also is what liability do you have on the content? Is it antiquated? Does it meet whatever it is you're trying to bring into compliance? If it's a compliance requirement that you were talking about, who's the gatekeeper? Because it's really easy to, oh, that's a great organization and they have all these videos. Someone's got a few, if we're going to do it. Coming back to that, and I don't have any answers to that, but I don't think we have. I think we have anyone assigned on the media side to all the video stuff there, but we take advantage of them, we want them, and then on the in-house stuff, they also have a shelf life also, and when do you revisit it? But it is the future, by the way, and a lot of training, but it requires more than creating the video.
Respond to insurance, I think that's really good. I think, especially 2018, everybody watches the video should have to give it a rating, like +3, +2, +1, 0, -1, -2, -3. Maybe then evaluate those ratings every year. And if any video is below 0, it should be considered for removal. Because I do think our teachers are highly intelligent and they just spend a bunch of time do that. I mean, that's what happens at conferences, and I think that shouldn't be too hard to implement. Chair Huntsman, does that sound like that at least creates some way to take it?
So the implementation goes back to what Chair Huntsman said. There's no owner of these. Right? Well, there's owners of them, but they're in their own respective sections. Then, if you have a rating system going, it'd be very difficult for us to know, are they rating it based on itself and that or the content or the subject, right? That or the person, that's presenting, So I think the first step is I'll just throw this out, so what problem are we trying to solve here? Are we trying to say there's just too many videos, and going back to the indexing part, and do we need to hire somebody to inventory these and bring some semblance of, well, these are outdated, and eliminate those, and that's really what I think we're up against. What is the problem here that we're trying to solve? Is it too many videos? Is it not sure what's required and what's not? And separate those by saying, like a facing page on the webpage, and say these are required. Here's who has to take them. Here's by the date you have to take them, and all that too. I mean, that would take some capacity. I just asked that question: is what staff need to be clear on what we're trying to solve here.
I don't think, my understanding with this being on the agenda is 240 training videos. I was under the impression that it was excessive and who's on top of them. And so maybe the question might be, Chair, is maybe we have staff, superintendencies, and say, talk about a couple things. Do we have videos? Yes or no? Who approves them for content and recommendation? I think there's another piece that says, do we have authorization to be using them? Ones that we haven't created. There's an operational perspective that comes from this. And so I can just keep going down the list of accountability and when are they antiquated. And I think if we turn Deputy Superintendent, give Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones to say, hey, we want to know, are we in the video business and what are we doing? Strengths and weaknesses, do we want to be in that business? Yes or no, and create our own and just get a report back from staff on
I
a
wonder,
little bit of the content of what we just talked about.
one of the things I mentioned to Scott is also, do we have counters on these so that they know how many people are actually viewing them? Because if we say, okay, we've got this money for training and we're gonna make a video and put it on our website, does anybody even know it's there and are they using it? And that, I think that's another issue, you know, is that good use of our funding to, you know, when we were discussing it in one of the meetings I was at, they said, but the potential is greater that more people will see it. And I said, yeah, and the potential is also zero in some cases if you don't let them know it's there. So yes, the potential is there that more people will be able to, but are people actually viewing?
So I think this is good feedback to give to our staff, and then you'll take this and get back with us. Oh,
Susan McCray, Financial Ops. I used to be the analyst for teaching and learning. There are several videos out there. They are created by teachers with the content specialist in teaching and learning. They follow rule and protocol, and then they are uploaded to a site on UEN. So the courses for specific subject matters are dispersed to, so like Ricky Scott is science, he would disperse all of that information to the science teachers and let them know what videos are available. They are vetted every year as far as content and if it's still appropriate. Diana Sudworth would be your main contact probably to speak to how those videos are archived and how they are sent out to teachers so that they know that they are there. They do know watches them. You have to sign up to view these videos, but she would be your content expert on that situation.
okay. All right. Okay, I think that's enough then. I don't think we need to vote on training videos. Do we have anything on section review?
No, so
We deleted
Table
that.
that until next week.
And request for data
Yeah,
information?
so the follow-up on the request for data and information was centric to the teacher supplies and materials discussion. So we did go out. So what we've also done is we've provided the report that was given two sessions ago, on the teacher supplies and materials, some recommendations there. The appropriation right now is like 5.5 million. Yeah, 5.5 million. So, you know, obviously that's lower than what we recommended. There's potential there. So now we're just, with the given information or the data that we've come back with, how would you like us to proceed?
I have some questions about this, and so I don't
You
know
wanna
if you
talk
want
after the
to, do
meeting?
you want to
Yeah.
wait to discuss it next month since we're out of meeting time now? Or do you, because I think it's kind of a larger discussion than we could discuss in like 2 or 3 minutes.
And feel free to talk to Deputy Jones right now. Or
He and I, we've already been talking, so
Okay.
it's just letting you guys know what we've found out and what we'd like to do, so.
You need a motion to bring it back next month.
I think that's there. Okay. Motion to end.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're done. Thank you.